Well, good morning. So lovely to see you all. Welcome to Destination Europe Summit, brought to you with the help of Booking.com and the European Travel Commission, an association of travel boards that was set up back in 1948 in order to promote Europe as a top tourist destination. My name is Maeve McMahon. I'm a journalist with Euronews, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. For those in the room who've come from near and far, welcome. Thank you for spending your morning with us. And for those online joining us and also live on our Euronews broadcast, welcome. Stay with us here if you want to hear how tourism in Europe is back to pre-COVID levels, but the sector is facing a number of difficulties. We'll be hearing about them right here over the morning. We'll also be hearing and meeting a number of MEPs, policymakers, and also those working on the ground in tourism every day, a sector that makes up almost 10% of our GDP here in the European Union. And our special guest this morning will be the European Commissioner from Greece, responsible for sustainable travel and tourism. The first time the Commission ever gets a proper tourism commissioner. So we're thrilled, obviously, to hear from him a little bit later. Of course, Mr. Commissioner Apostolos Tzitzikostas. But first, to set the scene for our discussions today, help me in welcoming up on stage the President of the European Travel Commission, that's Miguel Sanz.
Thank you, Maeve, and welcome everyone to this second edition of the European Summit Destination, organized by the European Travel Commission, Euronews, and in partnership with Booking.com. Your presence here today in Brussels and online shows just how important this conversation is at a key moment for European tourism. When we decided last summer to organize this summit, our goal was to ensure that the European Commission and all European Union institutions would be fully operational and ready to engage in critical discussions shaping the future of travel and tourism in our continent. Little did we know that we would witness a landmark moment and a long-cherished wish, the appointment of the first ever Commissioner for Sustainable Travel and, yes, Tourism. This historic development acknowledges tourism's essential role in Europe's economy, but also lifestyle, culture, and connectivity. We are honored to have Commissioner Apostolos Tzitzikostas with us here today, and eagerly looking forward to hearing his vision in just a few minutes. Let me also thank Glenn Fogel and Booking.com for their partnership in organizing this event. I am sure that his vision will also be enlightening. The digitalization of the tourism sector has played a pivotal role in the democratization of travel and the development of new destinations in Europe and the rest of the world. Once transport and accommodation are only a few clicks away, the challenge is to make millions of experiences and attractions digitally available to consumers. That means a profound digitalization of hundreds of thousands, probably millions, of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses in Europe, the backbone of our industry. I look forward to what he will tell us today. Let me begin with a positive note. Tourism in Europe is on an upward trajectory. The latest data from the European Travel Commission indicates that overall the sector is performing well, with both arrivals and nights up 6% compared to 2019. Many European destinations have already surpassed pre-pandemic levels in terms of volume and, what is more important, in tourism expenditure and jobs. However, the impact of the Russo-Ukrainian war remains severe, particularly in the Baltic and some Eastern European countries, where traveler numbers still continue to lag. Looking ahead, we see that the European travel sentiment, that is the European domestic market, remains strong. However, the international outlook for 2025 presents significant challenges. High costs are dampening inbound travel to Europe, with declining travel intentions from key long-haul markets such as the US, South Korea, and Brazil. Only China, a market still not fully recovered from the pandemic, shows a strong eagerness to visit Europe, according to our survey. This brings us to our first major topic of discussion today, Europe's competitiveness. Because yes, Europe is the world's favorite destination. but its share of international arrivals has declined over the last few decades as a result of an ever-growing number of very competitive destinations across the planet. Additionally, in recent years, Brand Europe has faced challenges due to safety concerns, climate emergencies, and local pushback. To maintain Europe's top position in strategic markets such as the Americas, and to help develop European destinations in new markets like India, China, or the Gulf countries, it is paramount that we invest in marketing Brand Europe. A strong Brand Europe increases the effectiveness and conversion into trips of marketing efforts by national, regional, or local tourism organizations, and allows small and lesser-known destinations to be visible in these markets. On the other hand, Europe's success story leads us to another crucial topic for today: how to better manage tourism and its impact in local communities. The European Union, together with the industry, has worked in recent years on a transition pathway for tourism, together with policy measures like Fit for 55. We at ETC are committed to working together with our members and partners, the industry at large, and the Commission to facilitate the knowledge and adoption of the different recommendations, best practices, and policies that will be laid out in the future EU Sustainable Tourism Strategy announced by the Commissioner. We will also work with our members and partners to develop marketing strategies that contribute to the social sustainability of our tourism model. We will pursue travelers that stay longer, travel off-season, off the beaten track, and experience local culture and products. Last summer, popular European hotspots faced some local resistance due to capacity limits and infrastructure strain. We must ensure that tourism is a real force for good and prosperity, putting local communities at the center. These are just some of the pressing issues we will explore today together. To guide our discussions, we have assembled an exceptional lineup of speakers from European Union and international institutions, the tourism industry, and European destinations. Their expertise and insights will be invaluable in shaping the path forward. In closing, I want to express my gratitude to all of you for joining us here today. A special thank you goes to the tourism unit of the European Commission for their outstanding support over the years, and to our ETC team at the headquarters here in Brussels that do a magnificent job. With the new European institutions now in place, we must recognize that European tourism knows no borders and therefore requires coordinated Euro-wide support and regulation. Only through joint efforts can we pave the way for a prosperous and resilient future. One where Europe stands as the global leader in responsible travel, enriching the lives of EU citizens and visitors alike. Thank you, and I look forward to an engaging and productive summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miguel Sanz, there, the President of the European Travel Commission and also the President of Tour España. Thank you so much for those opening words. You mentioned the word competitiveness. That's, of course, the buzzword around Brussels this season. You also mentioned a lot of the problems facing the industry now, from local pushbacks and also adverse weather conditions that we're seeing from Santorini to Valencia. They're issues that we will be diving into a little bit later with our panelists. And as I said earlier, our representatives that are working day to day in tourism all across our continent. But as I also said a little bit earlier, the European Commission now officially has a commissioner specifically in charge of not just sustainable transport, but also tourism. The Greek commissioner comes from a country that welcomes 33 million visitors per year. So he's a man who certainly knows what he is talking about. So please, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the commissioner in charge of sustainable transport and tourism, Apostolos Tsikikostas. Welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real privilege for me to join you here today as the European Commissioner for Sustainable Transport and Tourism. You know very well that tourism is a topic that is really close to my heart, and one that I'm committed on supporting with all my heart and all my strength, as it is indeed a major driver for competitiveness, for our regions, for our member states, for Europe. The inclusion of tourism in the transport portfolio reflects its growing importance for our economy, for our local communities, and of course, for the promotion of Destination Europe. The European Commission, and this is good news, is not the only institution pushing tourism up the political agenda. France and many countries have followed Italy and Greece's long-standing example by appointing a dedicated commissioner for tourism. The G7 tourist ministerial in Italy last November also marked a historical milestone. The first time tourism was officially added to the G7 agenda. And rightly so, because tourism is a powerhouse for economic growth, for job creation, for social development. Transport and tourism have a direct daily impact on millions of lives. That is both a profound responsibility, but also an extraordinary opportunity. But our changing world requires us to act quickly. The EU must step up its competitiveness, maintain its industrial leadership, or regain in some cases, strengthen its resilience and security, and achieve carbon neutrality. None of this would be possible without transport, without tourism playing their part. The Commission just adopted last week its competitiveness compass. Be assured that I am committed to ensuring that our sectors, the SMEs involved, gain recognition and support for the vital contributions that they make. Tourism alone supports over 3 million businesses and provides livelihoods for over 20 million people all across the European Union. Let's just take a minute to recognize what tourism has achieved in the recent years. Its recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic wasn't a given. Destination businesses, many of them SMEs, have worked hard to stay afloat and keep visitors going. In fact, tourism in Europe surged to record levels in 2024, surpassing even the pre-pandemic numbers. Travelers spent nearly 3 billion nights in our hotel, guest houses, and B&Bs, a 50% increase over the last 15 years. So Europe remains the world's most visited continent. And this is thanks to all of you, national tourism boards, destination management organizations, European and international institutions, national, regional, local authorities, and of course, businesses. But with success comes responsibility. We have seen residents protesting against overcrowding, against cost of housing and environmental strain in some key destinations. And I take this very seriously. I will engage with all the affected local authorities and with civil society to understand what and how the EU should act, share best practices, collect essential data to better manage flows. Tourism must be developed responsibly, attracting visitors who value authentic experiences, support local businesses, and travel off-season and off the beaten track. That is why we are unbalanced tourism and its effects on local communities, labor shortages and workforce training, SMEs' adoption of digital tools, including, of course, AI, and strengthening Europe's brand as a sustainable destination. And we will focus on destination management organizations, including local authorities, to ensure sustainable planning and visitor management, which is a need today in many cases. Small and medium-sized enterprises, the backbone of the sector of tourism, which need support to increase both innovation and stability, and of course, branding, to showcase Europe as a safe, sustainable, and outstanding travel destination, attracting both international and domestic travelers. Now, you know it very well. Europe might be the second smallest continent in the world, yet it is the most visited. But to maintain this leadership, we need unified branding, smarter marketing, and sustainable approaches. United, we will ensure that Destination Europe stands for excellence, diversity, and sustainability. And I count on you, on the European Travel Commission's continued support here. And I'm really happy, having heard the President, that you share the same views with me. But strategies only succeed if they are implemented, if they don't stay words or theory. Their success depends on collaboration across sectors, borders, and different government levels. So the first step is listening. That's why we will be engaging through extensive consultations with stakeholders this year. I want to hear from those on the ground, from all of you, so we can set the right priorities for our sustainable tourism strategy. And funding will indeed be the key. It must be more accessible to tourism businesses and authorities. The Commission has pledged to simplify EU funding programs, but we must also ensure that SMEs, local authorities, and tourism operators know and learn how to access these opportunities. During my 12-year experience as governor of a touristic region in northern Greece, I know firsthand the difficulties that regional local authorities and SMEs had when they wanted to access the European funding programs. We need to make things simpler, and we will. Cohesion funds, for instance, and other financial instruments must be fully leveraged to deliver tangible results where they matter most. But this, as you know well, isn't just about money. My role gives me the privilege of bringing people together, and I tend to do just that. Knowledge sharing and peer learning may not make headlines, but they can indeed be game changers. As Commissioner for Sustainable Transport and Tourism, I will also rely on your support for key transport initiatives that will improve the tourism experience, because indeed, transport and tourism are linked. Imagine seamless single ticketing for cross-border rail travel. Imagine easier cross-border rental car services, or a stronger EU passenger right regulation. Well, my dear friends, all this is coming. Early in my mandate, I will present all of these regulations in order to make the European market a real single market. These are the kinds of concrete improvements we will push for in the next couple of years. Now, going forward, I would like us to work together in order to ensure that every journey to and within Europe leaves our destinations enriched, our communities stronger and our visitors inspired to return again. I want to make sure that every citizen in the European Union, in all member states and regions, and all destinations, feel that they gain from tourism, that they are part of this success story. Together, we can elevate Destination Europe to a destination that not only welcomes the world, but leads by example in sustainability, inclusivity, innovation. And this is why I will be traveling to show the world what Europe is about. And while I have your attention, ladies and gentlemen, please do not forget that today, more than ever, we need to work having a common strategy and rely on all of you, the actors, the stakeholders of this great industry for Europe. And I am here, rest assured, to work with you very closely in the coming years. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, for prioritising this event. It is, of course, your first public speech since you became Commissioner, so we're thrilled to have you here with us today, here in the room and also live for our viewers back home who are tuning in to this event all about Destination Europe. The Commissioner certainly has his work cut out for him, so next year we'll be checking in again with him around this time to see how that sustainable strategy looks as it is rolled out and the impact, of course, it has on the industry. But of course, everything that is discussed and decided on in Brussels has a major impact on industry, on the private sector and on the tech sector. So you can imagine that they're keeping a very close eye on everything that's being discussed. The Commissioner also mentioned the Competitive Compass, which of course was launched and released just last week by the President herself, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. So it's really interesting now, and I'm thrilled to announce that our next guest represents Booking.com, one of the biggest travel companies, online agencies in the whole wide world, with its headquarters right here in Europe, in Amsterdam, just next door. So please, ladies and gentlemen, help me in extending a very warm welcome to Mr. Glenn Fogel, the CEO of Booking.com. Welcome. Great to see you, Glenn.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome to the Destination Europe Summit. Welcome to Euronews. How are you doing? How is business?
Business is good. Was that not inspiring what the commissioner just said?
It was inspiring. It was inspiring.
It just said everything that I would like to say about, basically, we don't have to talk. He said it all right there.
He said it all. Well, he did, and he is experienced. He knows, as I said, what he's talking about because he comes from Greece, and he really, you can tell that he means this. It's really coming.
Right, and he pointed out some of the challenges that we're going to face over the next few years, that it's not going to just happen if we don't work. We have to do things to make things better, and there's a lot of competition for that tourist euro or yen or dollar, whichever currency you want to say, and our job is to make sure it comes here.
Indeed, and he mentioned as well the local communities and responsible tourism, and later on actually we'll have a representative from Intrepid, an agency that are focused exactly on that, this idea of responsible tourism and also making sure that the local communities are gaining as well. But Glenn, just from your perspective, how is the industry doing right now that we're in 2025?
I think what the commissioner said was very important, is that so we had it was horrible with COVID, and yet we came out of COVID and everybody all of a sudden wanted to travel at the same time almost. And thankfully, a lot of them wanted to come to Europe, which was great. And we see our numbers in terms of the outbound from different countries and tremendous increases versus 2019 in terms of people coming to Europe, which is wonderful. The question is, will it continue or not? And obviously there's some concern that, well, people came, they went their long haul travel to Europe, and now maybe they'll go somewhere else. So our job is to convince them, it's a big place. There are a lot of great things to see. You came for a week, maybe you came for 10 days, but there are a lot of other great places to see, and that's our job together to present all these other wonderful places to visit.
And this idea of unified branding as well that the Commissioner mentioned, how do we get to there?
It's interesting. Now, I'm not a marketer, so I can't really add much to that conversation. But I do like the idea of trying to put together all of our resources together to create a reason why people should keep coming back. Look, I haven't counted the number of times I've taken a trip here. I'm a global person. But I'll tell you, I know, unfortunately, I will not live long enough to see all the places I'd like to see in Europe. And it's a sad thing, but it also says how incredible number of things to do and see.
It is indeed a very rich and diverse continent. But as I said earlier, your HQ is in Amsterdam. Mm-hmm. So what the Commission decides and does, of course, has a major impact on your company. We heard about the regulations as well that the Commissioner alluded to that will be coming out. I'd love to hear your feedback on this competitive compass that was presented last week.
So it is a very encouraging thing to see that there seems to be, let's say, a change in the direction of the wind, where there's an understanding that to be successful, to continue to be competitive around the world, we need to make sure that we put together a structure, a framework that is the best way, the optimal way to be able to achieve our goals. And that means regulation that is smart, not overlapping in different areas, and make sure that it's not something that is going to make us less competitive. And I think there's the right thought in Brussels to make sure that we're doing things that are going to help the businesses do what is good for everyone, which is to make it less, it's not making things no regulation, it's make sure we have smart regulations. And I think that's the right thought.
Yeah, we heard the Commissioner there. He paused before he said that word, let's make life simple. That is really the key word around here. But as you say, it'll be getting there and reaching that goal will be tricky. And just from your perspective...
Well, you know one thing on that, though? Imagine the small hoteliers or the small business people in our industry struggling with paperwork and forms and things they have to fill out and not knowing how do they do it, or is it right or not, or then getting penalized because it wasn't done right. And we at Booking.com, we have the we're fortunate that we have a lot of experts to be able to handle it, and we find it overwhelming. So for the small and medium-sized enterprises, I don't know how they deal with it.
Well, we talk to them a lot on Euronews, and they do vent their frustrations. It's not an easy time. But how do you think Europe is ranking when it comes to competitiveness?
I think we're not doing as well as we could be doing. I think we could improve. And when I look about one of the most important things that we see happening around the world is the technological changes. So we see coming in all these new types of ways to do things, particularly things like generative AI. Or we see now there's the buzzword now is agentic AI. And we see all sorts of new models coming in from different companies in terms of using AI. And one of the issues is that, for example, for us, we have hundreds of engineers who are devoted to using AI, but sometimes they can't even access the new technologies because of regulations or concern from a company that says, I don't want to bring this model, this technology to Europe because I'm concerned about the regulatory blowback to me. I may have liability. I may get in trouble. I don't want to do it. So all my hundreds of engineers in Amsterdam can't experiment, can't find ways to use this to make it better for our industry. That makes us less competitive. And I hope people recognize that and understand that.
Whereas, of course, regulators in Brussels see the AI Act as a massive feat, a massive accomplishment to set the standards for the world when it comes to AI. But just your personal and professional experience of using it, because obviously Booking.com has been using it for many years. Tell us how it's changing the way you do business and the way you make money.
Well, it's always been, we've been using AI more than a dozen years in machine learning stuff. What we're trying to do always is provide the optimal solution for both sides of the marketplace. We have the traveler and we have the supplier. Now, what's really important is that Many of our partners, our supplier partners, do not have the resources, the sophistication, the ability to do many of the things and technology that we can do and provide the services to them much less expensive, and they may not be able to do it at all. And that's a win-win for both of us. So we'll do things, for example, fraud detection. So we have very sophisticated machine learning models to detect fraud and when someone's going to pay with a false credit card and stuff. Well, the local player can't possibly come up with these sophisticated machine learning models. We do it for them. We prevent the fraud at their hotel before it happens. That's a service we don't charge for that, but that's not something. That's one small example. Now, customer service is another area. So we are developing with generative AI and other tools to create ways that we can do customer service much better and much faster. And we do it in over 40 languages, and we do it 24/7. A small hotelier, medium-sized, they can't do 40 different languages all the time, 24/7. That would not be cost-effective. We do it for them, but we're using technology to do a lot of that. And that's another way that we're able to help the small and medium-sized enterprise in the tourist industry be able to do what they do best, which is provide a good experience.
Provide a good experience. That is what it's all about. And just looking to the future, Glenn, what are your plans for AI?
Well, we continue to develop things. We would do it faster, depending on the regulatory framework, but we will still do it because we're competing against global giants, other players like us who are also going the same way, and they may not be held back as much as we may be because of the European regulations in AI. But our goal is to continue to use these new tools to create an even better solution. Look, I look forward to the day when somebody, when they want to travel, they just go in and say, I'm thinking I'd like to take a trip to Paris. And because this agentic AI knows so much about you and what you like and all things, it can personalize and come back. Here are some of the optimal solutions, not just a flight and not just the accommodations, but the entire trip, and then be able to change it. So for example, we've set it up. Somebody's coming to Amsterdam and they're going, everybody, tourists always wants to take a boat ride in Amsterdam. But we know what the weather's going to be. So we have set it up for Friday. They're in Amsterdam, and we know, though, it's going to rain on Friday. So we are sending them a message saying, we think you should change. Instead, we had you scheduled to go to the Rijksmuseum on Thursday. We're going to switch this. Do you like it or not? And it's easy because they're carrying their phone. And carrying a phone nowadays, and even more so in the future, it'll be like carrying the most sophisticated human travel agent who knows everything in your pocket and is always with you to make it better and easier. That's what we're building. And we are doing it as a partner with the suppliers, with all the people in the industry, so we all can succeed.
Sounds idyllic. Would certainly save a lot of time, but of course many are concerned about their data. How do people in the room feel about that idea? Oh, I'm sure if you ask that same question in the States, you'd get a very different reaction.
Well, I'm curious, and I know we don't have time, but it's interesting. Who doesn't like things that are more efficient and easier and will help prevent mistakes and getting people and prevent the disappointments? Oh, we should have taken the canal tour tomorrow and not today. I'm curious. We don't have time to ask but I wonder why the lack of enthusiasm.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? It is quite telling, because I'm sure artificial intelligence will inevitably change radically the way we do travel and the way we do tourism. Go ahead, 10, 15 years.
It won't change the way we actually are experiencing the travel. We will always need to have the pleasant introduction at the desk in the hotel welcoming you to the accommodation. We will still want the friendly travel advisor, only it's coming through technology, not from the human. We'll still want, when people do an attract to take a tour, you want a knowledgeable human tour person to tell you all about it. That's not going to do. What we want to change is the way we do the bookings, the way we do the payments, the stuff that's not really the travel experience. It's the annoying parts.
The boring admin, as you call it. Right.
Yeah.
Well, just moving on to traveller trends. Later in the session, we will have a presentation from MasterCard to get data on how we are travelling now. But just from your perspective, have you seen any kind of radical changes in traveller preferences over the last couple of years since we came out of COVID?
And not radical changes, but trends that have been continuing for some time. So over many, many years, we see more and more people looking for a short-term rental as opposed to a hotel. Hotels are still a bigger part of the industry, but more and more people are looking at short-term rentals. It's a trend that's gone on forever. And that is the commissioner was talking about. It's an issue that we'll all have to deal with because the issue of does that impact the cost of housing for people who live in the city or not? Does it actually contribute to over-tourism and things? These are important issues that we have to deal with. It's a trend, though, that we do see happening.
And is there a role for you there to help in dealing with those issues locally?
Absolutely. And we are working with all of the appropriate regulatory people to come up with the right schemes to set things up to make sure that there is not overburdening in one part of the city, perhaps, or make sure people are paying the appropriate taxes that they should pay, et cetera. But it's not just us and the regulators. It's all the stakeholders. So you have the community. You have to think about what their interests are in the thing. And you also have to think the travelers' interests, too, because we want them to come. And partly, if they can't get the type of accommodation that they want, then they may go somewhere else. So we have to be conscious about that issue.
And earlier we heard from Miguel Sanz. He mentioned the Fit for 55 package. Of course, there's big plans here in this continent to be carbon neutral by 2050. What are you seeing in that field? Is there a lust for travellers to be more sustainable? And what role as well is Booking.com playing here?
So I'm going to speak the honest truth, and it's on the record, so I'm going to be careful, okay? Everybody wants to be sustainable, but they want somebody else to be sustainable. So here's the thing. So we've done experiments in the past. We've tried to say, well, would you be willing to pay €1 more or €2 more for certain sustainable things or not? And sadly, most people will go for the cheaper price. Now, we spend a lot of money ourselves out of our own pocket and do things to make things more sustainable. And we've worked very closely with regulators, trying to come up with ways to help our partners be more sustainable, providing guide playbooks and ways that a hotel could be more sustainable, getting all sorts of ways that you can do it and actually, in the long run, increase profitability. Example be changing incandescent lighting to LED lighting. It's more expensive up front, but in the long run, you'll save on electricity. Just one small example. There are many of those things. But the hard part is that people, if it's cheaper, even though it's less sustainable, many people choose that. And that's something where you'll end up having to have, this is where you need governments to come in. And if our governments, through their elected officials, would like to make certain rules or such, that is the privilege of government to do that. We don't make the rules. We just want to help follow them, and we want to give good guidance. But in the end, it's up to the regulators to make these kind of decisions.
It's up to the regulators to make those kind of decisions. And of course, here in Europe, it's a priority, but it's not, of course, in other parts of the world.
Which is problematic because the last time I checked, we just have one atmosphere. And that's you know, it doesn't divide up. It's not like, okay, we get to the end of Europe and now we get a different atmosphere over, and that's not it. And so if another country is building 2 coal plants a week, okay, we can do all we want to make sure we are more sustainable in our area, but that's not going to help in terms of the problems for the world. So again, this becomes not just a government in Europe issue, this ends up being a global issue. Now, I'm not a politician, I'm not a global politician, I can't do anything about that, but I sure hope everybody gets together and figures it out quick.
Yeah, for our grandchildren, indeed. You said you're not a regulator, but as Booking.com, I guess you have a responsibility to hold perhaps the hands of small SMEs and small businesses who are trying to be more green and trying to be more sustainable. Are there any examples that you can share with us?
Well, we did. You know, we came out. Here's an interesting thing how this, and this goes into the regulatory framework too a little bit. So we came out with a program to be a leader, a sustainability program. And we thought it was wonderful. And it was working with our partners to how they could be more sustainable too. And we promoted them on our, when somebody went for an accommodation, we put onto the site that if you were a sustainable accommodation, you would get a green leaf. or 2 or 3, depending on how sustainable you were. And when the search result came back to the customers who were looking for accommodations, they would see, ooh, this accommodation has more leaves, maybe I'll choose. It says none, maybe I won't use that one. I think this is a good way to try and give someone an incentive to be sustainable, to get on the ranking, to have their green leaf, et cetera. And then we have a regulator came back and say, oh, that's not good, you can't do that. Like, well, why can't we do this? This is good for the world, it's good for everybody, win-win, why can't we do this? Well, how are you certifying that those green leaves and those people are really doing what you say they're doing? And we're saying, well, we have millions of customers, and if they're using incandescent lighting, when they told us they're using LED lighting, we'll find it'll be showing that's not good enough. You need to get a third-party certification before you can do something like this. And we're saying, but it's going to cost the supplier a lot of money to get third-party certification. No, we don't care. Get the third-party certification. So we're like, okay, we'll do it that way. We'll go get the third-party certification. And you know something? A lot of the small size, they can't afford it. They don't do it. And that's unfortunate.
They can't afford it, and neither can the consumers. Another question, Glenn, for you. The travel industry, for example, in Europe, we all tend to take holidays at the same time, during school holidays, for example, and we all tend to go to our top favourite destinations. What role does Booking.com here, or what role can you play here in helping to diversify regions and promote other more obscure parts that also need tourism and need to be brought alive?
So the bigger issue is we'll work with all of you on this. It's an issue. It's really important for the people who are marketing locations that are not as popular to be coming up with reasons that people should go there. Because we, by ourselves, our role really is not trying to direct people to different places. We try and look, we are here to provide the way that you, the customer, can achieve your goal. And if you want to go to Paris, we're not saying, you know, Normandy's a really great place to go too. That's the responsibility of the people, let's say, and just give me an example of Normandy, to promote Normandy and stuff. And I'm going to, again, go back to a truth that we all know. This is going to be really hard because people around the world who have not gone to Paris are going to want to go to Paris. And we can do all the marketing we want for Normandy. And we can say what a wonderful place it is to visit, historical sites. I'm telling you, there are billions of people and they want to go to Paris. We're not going to be able to change that. So how are we going to deal with this? Because it is a problem. In summer in Amsterdam, you can't walk. Barcelona, Venice, Florence, it goes on, and it is going to get worse. I am telling you, as the economies grow, as people who did not have the money to travel want to travel, they are going to want to go to the most popular places. Why? There's a reason they're the most popular places, because that's where people want to go. And it's a difficult thing, and we can talk a lot, and we're going to work together. We're going to work, all of us together, to try and get up ways to get people to go. But it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. And one way that may be the way to do it, there may be a need to bring in some sort of price mechanism that will cap the number of people who go to a certain location. And that, again, goes to the governments and the regulators and the community to decide how they want to do it. That's not for us to do, but we are definitely going to work together to achieve that goal.
And just one final question, Glenn Fogel. We're at the start of a new political mandate here in Brussels. That's why there's a hive of activity in this town, as you've noticed. What would you whisper into the ear of the Commissioner? What should his 3 top priorities be?
Okay, the first thing is look at where we are today. You get a fresh start. So you are now allowed to look back and say, are the things looking back that we should change? Number one. Number two, do number one before you start doing new programs, new projects, make sure we're set up, and the third thing I'll say, which I've said before, and I'll come back to it, it's that old thing about that when you've dug yourself into a hole, the first rule is stop digging, okay? That's the first thing. Let's see where it all is. Let's see what can we change that's already out there. Make sure we got that straightened the way we want it. Then, once we get that accomplished, then we can look at, okay, are there new things to be done? That would be really helpful.
So work on what we've got before you start presenting new.
I think it'd be helpful.
Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking.com, thank you so much for being with us here at Destination Europe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Glenn Fogel there, the CEO of Booking.com, outlining his concerns and also his success stories and anecdotes there. So thank you so much to him for his time. If you've just joined us, you're live here on Euronews at the Destination Europe Summit, where we're taking a look at the challenges facing the travel and tourist sector today. I'm Maeve McMahon, a journalist with Euronews, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. So, we've already had a number of key positions coming from the European Commission. We've heard as well from the President of the European Travel Commission, Michael Sanz. And we've also heard from the private sector, which was very, very interesting. So now, as I promised earlier, it is time to hear from a number of European MEPs and also from those working day to day in the sector in countries like Italy, which is, of course, one of the most popular destinations for Europe. So for this panel, I'm delighted to say we can welcome up on stage, in no particular order, Alexandra Priante. That's the president of the Italian National Tourist Board. Welcome. Over here. Let's go. We'd also have Daniel Attar, Maltese member of the European Parliament, who comes from the Socialists and Democrats. And representing the European Commission from DG Move, we have the director, Magda Kopniewska. And to get more of a perspective from industry, we're thrilled to have the Director General of Airports Council International Europe. They represent no less than 600 airports in 55 countries. That's Olivier Jankovic. And last but not least, all the way from Croatia, Nikolina Brinjak, a Croatian member of the European Parliament from the European People's Party, the former Minister of Tourism for Croatia. Welcome. Lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining. It's really interesting to have your perspective now. There's so much to talk about with that sustainable tourism strategy coming out in Q1 of 2026. So hopefully this panel will serve some fruit for thought, some ideas that the Commission can then filter right into that document. For this, of course, we want to bring in as well our audience. You can use the app Slido to offer your questions, your points, your comments. And you can also take a look, if you like, already and answer the question that you have there on Slido and on your screen, which is, what do you consider the most important initiative by the European Commission and the DG for Tourism to enhance Europe's competitiveness as a tourism destination? So if you have a chance, you can take a look at Slido and answer that question, and we'll come back to it a little bit later. But let's start with yourself, Alexandra, from Italy, because of course it's one, as I said, of Europe's top travel destinations. What is the biggest challenge for you on a day-to-day basis in making sure that here in Europe we remain competitive, given, as we heard, the rising global competition, extreme weather pressures, and the need, of course, for sustainable transformation?
It's great to be here, first of all. So thank you very much, especially with this esteemed group of panelists. Let me start off by saying that I now feel completely refreshed after the speech of the commissioner. All the things he said is like a dream come true. It's like, oh my God, is this real or not? Is this, happening or not? So really, I feel very, very, very encouraged in my job. What's my biggest challenge? I would say that as a mature destination, and it's probably one of the most visited destinations, definitely in Europe and in the world, I tend to say that I have the easiest job in the world. Promoting Italy is probably one of the easiest things to do. But I think the biggest challenge is to really put an effort to enlarge Italy as a destination beyond the main points of attraction. So really creating an attractiveness, and the attractiveness is not just promoting it or marketing it, is also accessibility, and is also in starting a conversation with the local communities. All the other destinations that are around, I tend to look at our main cities as the point of a compass that you go around, and you must be inclusive. You need to include everything else, because if we really want to be sustainable, we really have to look at travel as something slightly more holistic, where we're including the majority of the destinations. But I also like to point out one thing, which is very important. The cost of social sustainability of tourism now is getting very high. We must make sure that in whatever strategy we put forward, we include the communities. Not everyone wants to become a tourism destinations, all right? Let's face it, we don't need to force or push tourism into the agenda if the community doesn't really feel fit to welcome tourists. But the majority do, and so we have to keep them part of the discourse and really have a very, very thorough approach with a clear idea as well that our diversity is our strength. And I think what applies for Italy also applies for Europe.
And I'm curious to hear the plans that you're rolling out, but let's bring in the perspective from Croatia. And as I said, you're the former minister responsible for tourism, so you have experience on the ground of national issues, but now, of course, as an MEP, you understand the European issues. So what level or what issues did you encounter back home in Croatia that you see similar in other countries and you can fix perhaps now that you are an MEP?
So first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here and to have in the first-hand opportunity to tell about our challenges and our experience, which we had in Croatia. So in Croatia, I would say that one of the biggest challenges which we faced was that tourism was happily by inertia. And like in most of the countries, there was no governance, there was no management of the development. And like in all European destinations, we are fighting with over-tourism, seasonality, a shortage of housing issues in the tourist destination. It's a big, big problem for our young families, especially. And then climate crisis. Then you, Alessandra, mentioned at the beginning also a lot of destinations. We could see for the last year, they had the biggest problems with local communities. And why are there problems? Because I think that there's nothing to be done in the tourism in means of management development of the tourism. And also we have now the problem of economy of booking also, and platforms and all of the others for the short-term rentals, which is obviously rising. And we have big pressure on the same space and the infrastructure, and we realized everything what was happening. So we then decided to have, if we wanted to go towards sustainability, we knew that we have to make a new strategy, and we adopted actually in the 1st of January 2024. We adopted first act on tourism. And why it's important, this act on tourism? It's important because now it allows on regional and local levels destination management planning, according to the carrying capacities calculations. So then to these destination management plans, you got the recommendations for the local government and the regional government. For example, they can introduce the ecological tax for one-day visitors. If the calculation is showing this, then they can decide about the number and the type of accommodation or the catering facilities. Then the projects which are financed to the private sector and to the public sector. We have developed incentives for the private sector also through this act. And now, as you said, that's a good opportunity for all of us to talk about it and discuss it in the tourism task force, which we have in the parliament also. Colleague Daniel is a member of the tourism task force. And I think it's important to see, I'm not suggesting new legalization acts or something like this from the parliament, but it's something like we developed a methodology, and this methodology is very useful, and it could be very useful for all other countries. Okay. But it has to be tailor-made.
It has to be tailor-made
to the needs of the country.
Can't be one size fits all for such a diverse continent. I'll stop you there, because I want to bring in as well the perspective from the European Commission, from the head of DG Move. Of course, transport is your thing, but tourism cannot work if transport doesn't work well. Now, we've been hearing that the priority for this Commission, and indeed the Commissioner mentioned it earlier as well, is implementing a single European rail ticketing system. It's 2025, Magda, and we still don't have it. Why is that?
Thank you and warm good morning to everybody. It's never a good start to correct the moderator, but it's not true that transport is my thing. As of now, tourism is my thing as well.
Thing. Exactly. It was your thing. So what I'm saying is you're our transport expert here.
I know. But I said that because I also wanted to respond to what Alessandra said and just to assure you, no, it's not a dream, it's a reality. And if anybody has any doubt about the level of commitment and enthusiasm that my entire team, led by Commissioner Tzitzikostas, have for tourism, you heard the speech. Every word was carefully chosen and brilliantly delivered. Now, why I think it is really good to put transport and tourism together is because tourism cannot function without transport. And one of the big objectives of transport is to help tourism. You asked about ticketing in the rail sector and the fact that we have 2025. And I do agree with this diagnosis. But it is actually more complicated than we might think, because we need to address the question of digital platforms. What can, what cannot happen, what should happen on those platforms when it comes to access to tickets for rail and for other transport modes. We also need to address rail sector to make sure that, and I will not name names, that some of the rail companies do not use the excuse of not selling tickets of other rail companies as a way to restrict the access to the market. Believe it or not, we have regulations in place that should liberalize rail market for many years now, and it doesn't always work like that. And I very much hope that with this, because it will be a package of proposals, it's not possible to do it just with one piece of legislation, that we will create a reality where users, tourists, but also citizens who use transport, rail in particular, for their daily life, commuting, not only going for business, that they will have an easier access, they will be able to choose which train they want to take, where they want to buy it, and also that will create much more transparency and more competition when it comes to pricing. We cannot dictate prices to companies, but we can force them for transparency, and we want to make sure that there are no hidden tables that you cannot see, that you will not have to go to 70 different websites, that there will be several websites where all those train journeys will be visible and you will be able to buy the tickets.
And of course, Mario Draghi, in his well-read report, alluded to the utopia he described of the importance of making rail better fit for purpose in Europe. Hopefully one day will become a reality. But we don't either have a representative from the rail industry around the table here to discuss it with, but we do from the airport. So lovely to have you and hear your perspective. Just when it comes to trends, Olivier, do you see a shift in demand perhaps from air to rail?
Yes, there is a shift. I mean, that's reflected in our data that shows actually that all the recovery we have in passenger traffic since COVID is happening mostly due to international passenger traffic rather than domestic passenger traffic. And one of the reasons for that is indeed that more people are taking the train. I think we need more multimodality, clearly. Very often our airport CEOs are frustrated in terms of how slow is it to develop multimodality, especially with the rail sector. It's very important for us because it responds to two imperatives. The first one is, of course, sustainability. You know, it's a way of reducing emissions, especially for urban transport, because if you look at an airport, you can have up to 50% of CO2 emissions produced locally that come from access to and from the airport. So that's a very important part of decarbonization strategies for airports. The second is, of course, expanding the catchment area of an airport. Because if you're connected to the rail network, especially to the high-speed train network, all of a sudden, as an airport CEO, you can go and talk to the airlines and tell them, listen, my market is my city, but it's actually much larger than my city. And that makes route development for the airport much more easy. Having said that, I think there's a lot of dogmatism in the debate about shifting rail for air. And I think it's down to the fact that it's usually poorly informed in terms of data, because if you look at the actual potential for substitutability, it's quite small. I mean, Eurocontrol came up with a very interesting study last December, which shows that assuming that all current plans for high-speed train development could be effectively delivered in Europe, which is not a given, the potential by 2050 to reduce air travel by this shift would be just 0.3% less demand for air travel. And that really brings me to another issue, which is the crucial importance of airport capacity development for Europe, for its competitive position, and of course for the tourism sector. Because, you know, most people who come from Europe, from outside Europe, they come by air. And the commissioner said, you know, we face a lot of competition as Destination Europe. And in facing that competition, we're facing other regions of the world who are capitalizing on airport development as a major competitive asset to develop not just their tourism sector, but their economy. Meanwhile, in Europe, we're going against the wall. I mean, half of the most congested airports in the world are in Europe. And Eurocontrol, again, released another very interesting study showing that basically by 2050, the lack of airport capacity in Europe will mean that 1.1 million flights will not be able to take place. And that translates into 140 million people unable to fly. So that's 140 million less tourism for Europe, potentially. And that's something I think Europe needs to look at very seriously.
And Daniel, of course, as a Maltese MEP, the only way you can leave the island and be with us here in Brussels and do your job in the Parliament is, of course, by air. Do you feel that we're up against a brick wall here with this issue?
Precisely. I mean, first of all, not just thank you, but congratulations for this very well organized and excellent event.
Thanks for being here.
As you rightly put it, I mean, coming from Malta, first of all, tourism is not just a luxury, it's our lifeline, it's our bloodline. We depend on tourism to sustain our economic growth and our economic resilience. We rely also on air transport. So while we support, obviously, the investment in high-speed rail networks to connect key destinations and reduce reliance on short-haul flights in Europe, we're full support of those efforts. But at the same time, obviously, we must not think of air transport as an afterthought. Air transport must remain at the core of our discussions at the European level. And also, air transport is at the core of achieving the targets set out in the Green Deal. We must shift from thinking as regulators to being more of enablers, because we know that the industry, more often than not, responds positively. And the industry, what it demands is not deregulation, but smart implementation, clarity. The industry seeks clarity. The industry seeks that we enable them to reach the targets. And that is what I think what we are here for as policymakers. And I was really happy to hear the Commissioner this morning, because he delivered an excellent speech, an inspirational speech. And you said that we have, the first time, a proper Commissioner. I would say we have a perfect Commissioner for
his cheeks would be going rosy
for the job. No, but I speak out of conviction, not convenience, because I believe that we have the right man for the job, with clearly the right backbone behind him to deliver the targets, the ambitions which we all have. Because at the end of the day, tourism is the key sector and the key driving force for economic resilience in the European Union. And that means that tourism must not exist in a vacuum. We must not think that tourism is just a sector. It's a cross-cutting sector which affects the economy at large.
And struggling from a negative reputation and image, often due to a lot of reports on local pushbacks and over-tourism, etc.
Agreed. Yesterday we discussed on sustainability, having the three pillars, which I believe in: the economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And from that, we discussed also the three Ps, being the planet, people, and places. I would add another two Ps, being politics and perception. Because politics affects perception, and perception is no longer a perception because it becomes reality. Because people act and react on their perceptions, so we as politicians must shape those perceptions, because at the end of the day, tourism is a success story We have growing pains of tourism, and we must fix those growing pains.
And that's up to Magda and her team, of course, who work for the perfect commissioner. Just going back, though, to aviation, of course, and that is how most of us travel still in Europe. We're still very highly dependent on aviation, but it's a hard-to-abate sector. So what is the role of the Commission here in addressing this?
Thank you for that. And I was just thinking that possibly maybe a good starting point for the answer to this question is to reassure everybody that the objective for the European Commission is not to tell people how you travel, regardless of the reason for which you travel. But at the same time, it's unquestioned and undisputed that the entire transport sector, just like every other economy sector, has to decarbonize. So we have a framework in place that will gradually make aviation less dependent on fossil fuels. Yes, it will take time because it's a hard-to-abate sector, as you said. Yes, it will take time because the alternative fuels that are needed for that sector are not there yet, but they should be gradually coming into place, and we'll be looking into framework conditions, investment planning, working with member states to make sure that they are there. But we will also, and I link here a little bit to what Olivier was discussing, I think we will also be trying to make sure that everybody knows if there is an alternative. It doesn't mean you will need to take that alternative, but you need to know that this alternative exists. And one topic that I'm coming across is often the question, okay, but how do we decide the planes, what is the impact, what is the CO2 emissions? We just published something which is called flight emission label, which we will encourage, because it's a voluntary label, we will encourage airlines to sign up to. And once they do, when you will be buying the ticket for this specific airline, you will see the emissions, and it will all be counted in a comparable and verified manner. Again, just to make sure that whenever any of us makes decisions how we travel and where we travel, we have the data that we want to have. But just to be very, very clear, connectivity is crucial. Connectivity is crucial within the EU, and connectivity is crucial from outside the EU into the EU. And this connectivity will not be undermined. Having said that, we have many problems when it comes to the future capacity, not just the airports, but also the skies. But then I would take the entire morning talking about that, so I'll save it for another occasion.
Well, let's bring in then Olivier, because of course airports do have to play a big role here when it comes to decarbonisation. I'm curious to hear where we are regarding the deployment of sustainable aviation fuels.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I can just echo Magda's words. Decarbonization for the aviation sector is at the really top of our agenda, because we're very conscious that it's no longer just about our license to grow, but about keeping our license to operate. So we're really committed. We're working hard to decarbonize. We are a hard-to-abate sector. It's going to take time, and there are huge challenges involved. When it comes to SAF, this is crucial in our decarbonization pathway, because based on a roadmap we've presented together with the airlines, the air traffic management sector, and the aircraft and manufacturers, actually 51% of our CO2 reduction abatement by 2050 will come from sustainable aviation fuels. But the blunt reality today is that the sustainable aviation fuel produced meets 0.1% of the fuel consumption by airlines. So it was 1 million tons produced last year. To get to net zero, we need 400 million tons. So we have a huge challenge in scaling up, in getting the production capabilities in Europe. And we have a huge challenge in bringing down the price, because sustainable aviation fuel is 2 to 8 times more expensive than conventional fuel. So if you just keep that price level, you're destroying the sector, you're destroying connectivity, you're destroying tourism.
And the price, yeah, well, because it will fall on us, the consumer.
We are very ambitious in Europe about that, and that's very good. We have the right, I would say, half of the right policy framework in place, if I may, Magda, because
I ask for the possibility to come in, so you can say whatever you like. I'll comment.
All are welcome to come in, and the audience, if you want to pop your comments as well. And
we like what we have, because we have mandates that give certainty about where the industry needs to go. And when I say industry, it's not just aviation, but the fuel producers. So they know they have to supply a certain level of increasing percentage of sustainable aviation fuel to get us to net zero. And that's great. That's exactly what we need from our regulator. But actually, we need more. We need more support from the EU to make sure that there is indeed production facilities being built in Europe, that we don't depend on imports, that we gain also our energy autonomy in that. And we need support to bring down the price. And we're not yet there. So that's why we're very hopeful with the clean industrial deal that's going to come up, because that needs to be in the clean industrial deal. We need a SAF industrial policy, and we need it now.
We know exactly what you need. You've been so perfectly clear and crystal clear. So let's hear from Magda, and then perhaps get the perspectives then from the MEPs as well.
Just to be very clear, I do not disagree with almost anything that Olivier said, but just a quick word of clarification. What we put in place are requirements for airlines to gradually have more of sustainable aviation fuels in the fuels that they use. Until 2030, they need to have 2% of those fuels in the mix. Why so slow? Because we need to ramp up production and because we need the prices to come down. As with anything that is on the market, the more fuels on the market, the more competition on the prices. The target for 2035 will be until 2035 will be 7%. It's only as of 2035 that we'll ask for 20%. Again, we know we can't go faster because we need to have that production and we need to have those prices down because it cannot impact on consumers. But maybe just a word of perspective. 7 years ago, nobody talked about alternative fuels in aviation. We are creating a market that didn't exist. Now, I'm hearing from producers, we have enough fuels on the market to fulfill those targets until 2035. And it just shows that once we put clearly the requirements, when we said, this is what you will have your market for, this is what you will have your buyers for, the production started coming. But Olivier is right, we need it to happen faster. We need it to happen in Europe. We have learned the hard way what dependency on fossil fuels from outside can lead to, and we need to find ways to bring the price down.
And as Daniel said earlier, the industry needs clarity as well in order to reach those goals. Nicolina, comment there perhaps on how you can support in this endeavour.
But I think I was listening very carefully what is, and I'm always listening what is happening with all of our destinations. We have also in Croatia destinations which are dependable on the air transportation and aviation. So, but I think the problem is not there's no simple solution. I was hearing Magda saying everything is okay, we are going to have enough fuel, but I don't know if this is completely true, because we have problems with the airports, bigger and smaller airports. So some of them can go in this direction and achieve this goal, but for smaller airports it's not going to be so easy. So we have to think, if we are thinking about the tourism, I know I was the first one the minister who was talking about sustainability, and I really understand the meaning, and it's not so easy to have the balance of all three pillars. It's very difficult. And I'm supporting also Magda, because they're taking all of the efforts to go in this direction, because we have to think about all of these three pillars. And this is why I think it's not going to be so easy. Maybe we are not going to achieve it in a time like we want to, but we have to try. We have to try and not to. We have to support the industry. It's very important for the tourism sector and for Malta and our large destinations, Greece, in Croatia, some of the destinations. So Europe is dependent also on good aviation and industry. So.
And just to come back to this idea of brand Europe, where we are on that, we heard the Commissioner earlier, he mentioned this idea of a unified European tourism brand. How can it be strengthened, Daniel?
I would like to think of brand Europe not as Rome, Valletta, Brussels, Vienna. I would like to think as brand Europe in terms of our culture, in terms of our history, in terms of our product offerings, our culinary experiences, our hospitality. That is brand Europe. That is what unites us. And that is what we must strive to achieve. And I think there are many key objectives which can be achieved. First of all, with regards to funding. When I speak of funding, it's not necessarily new funding opportunities which are needed. We need a dedicated budget line to support growth. But we also need to have, as the Commissioner rightly pointed out this morning, a harmonized approach. We need to ensure that the tourism features in existing funding opportunities through the European Structural and Investment Funds, for example. We need also to support public-private partnerships to enhance investment in the sector, digital platforms, multimodal platforms. We need also, obviously, to look beyond from a socialist perspective to ensure proper hospitality, which is crucial for brand Europe. We need to invest in more upskilling and also reskilling. And in the process, ensure that we protect the rights of workers who work in the industry. Because, unfortunately, tourism, while it is one of the main pillars of our economy, it can also be a source of exploitation. We know that we have a lot of third country national workers who support the industry, which sometimes are also subject to exploitation. So we must ensure that through this process, we safeguard the conditions of workers.
So the goals are very clear. But just on this brand Europe, if you look at the United States, for example, last year they spent 250 million on marketing efforts, whereas here it's extremely underfunded and, quite frankly, mismanagement. What would you kind of see there as what needs to be done?
Actually, we were just discussing it yesterday at our ETC meeting, exactly. First of all, I mean, we've been speaking about brand Europe for quite an amount of years. But this is the real time, I think, and this is what's very exciting for us to actually put it into practice. Brand Europe works, and it does not just for the very far tourists. It actually works for us, and that's why I would like to make a connection to what I said in the beginning, which is that our diversities of countries of Europe doesn't exclude the fact that we can be perceived as a united destination also by us, not just, again, for the long haul, for the Americans, for the Chinese, for the Far East, for the Middle East, who naturally consider going to different capitals of this fantastic continent as a European trip. They don't really perceive the difference. But I think also for us, I think this is where there's a scope of work that we can pursue. And let me just add one thing, which is very important. We've been talking, I mean, it's very easy to talk about funding as a solution for things. I think what is very important for us now, and again, it's a historic occasion, is we set down the methodology. And I feel that the ETC is in a privileged position to be the main interlocutor for the Commission for this, because the methodology means data. The methodology means sharing best practices. The methodology means applying for us what also works for other member states. And it also means one thing, identifying the issues, because we have very common issues together. I think the perceiving, for example, the transport, fundamental, absolutely. All the issues there, absolutely there. Starting from very practical solutions, it is the best way to do it. But it's not it. You don't solve the European situation just by that. To give you an example, I think something that emerged yesterday in our discussion, which I would like to also share with the audience today, which I said by a colleague, is that we also must put an effort in keeping Europeans in Europe. And I think this is interesting. Why? Because if I think about my main source market, but I think this applies as well to Croatia, to Greece, also to Malta. I mean, my number one source market is Germany. So it is Europeans, and then you have France, and then you have Spain. It is Europeans also that love to travel in Europe. So we must have a vision of brand Europe, of something that unites us as well and keeps us very strong.
And Southern Europe is booming, but we need to perhaps do more to promote Eastern Europe, because since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, that will just mark 3 years now in February, we're seeing a problem in that area which needs to be solved.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been hearing things about northern destinations being attractive lately because of the climate change. People just starting to go north because they want to be a little bit cooler. Interesting. But I agree with you. I want to go East Europe. I want to be able to travel back. I want to go to Prague. I want to go to Lithuania. I want to go to Ukraine. Finally, for the first time, I owe it to Mariana, I promised her. And I want to do it in a perception of safety, connectivity that works, and also the essence of being European, which is that I think we have a unique way of storytelling. I agree with I think the example of Brandy you say is very interesting. It works, but I think nobody has enough depth and width and profundity and I would say multifaceted content as much as we do. And I think we should be fully aware of it, exploit it at our best, and for a moment, and I'm saying this especially to the Italians, not just focus on the things that don't work. I'm tired of participating in debates when people ask me, Italy, over tourism. No, I want to stop this completely. I think we must shift the paradigm. We have a tourism commissioner. We have the European Commission and the European Parliament talking tourism loudly and proudly. Believe me, it wasn't like this before. So this is an historic occasion that we must take, and we must do it all together.
Thank you so much for that. And we have Daniel Attar as well, who has replaced the word of over-tourism with growing pains, which I think is a nice way to allude to it.
I call it bad management because this is what it is, you know.
And the Commissioner, of course, he said this morning as well, he's very much in listening mode. It will be all about swapping notes as well, seeing what works, what doesn't. And that's where Croatia comes in, because, of course, you have this joint promotion platform that has seen major growth in long-haul tourism over the last 20 years. What lessons do you think can be drawn from this success that other countries perhaps could take?
So you were talking about Europe as a brand and as a destination. Europe is the most visited destination in the world, obviously, and Europe has it's a specific destination, I would say, because it has renowned destinations. And what we discussed earlier, I think that what we can be, what is in favor of us, we have the same currency. We have the same visa regime for the third countries. We share the same values. We have rich history, culture, natural heritage. We are really unique as a destination, and there's a reason why you mentioned this platform for financing. There's a good potential for us on the market. And how does it in practice? How does it work? We are also, Alessandra knows this, competitors, not only between countries, but within regions in a country. So this is in practice. But I think that we should take advantage of all this, which I mentioned before, be unique on the market, because we have really good experience with the joint platform, Croatia, Austria, and Slovenia together, so on the United States market. And this experience is great, because we have now more than ever visitors coming from the United States. And this is the opportunities also in front of us for the brand Europe. So I'm very positive about this.
Olivia, you'd like to weigh in there?
On Destination Europe in general? Well, I think, our fate is intertwined between the aviation sector and the tourism sector. So I think it does make sense indeed to pursue that avenue and to think differently on how we market Europe as a destination.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt. Maybe it could be a good idea to have projects like, I don't know, visiting the capitals of culture, European capitals of culture, or visiting for financing, visiting the European capitals of spa or railway, traveling through railway through Europe, something. It had a lot of opportunities.
Sure. And as airport, we always work closely with the destinations, to attract connectivity, to develop the route network. So we are always ready to support the tourism authorities in there.
You want to weigh in?
On Destination Europe or money or both?
I think money, because that's where the Commission comes in. And you do have pockets of money in various different funds. So tell us how it can be distributed among those that are interested in it today.
Well, first of all, about those pockets, this is not really a small pocket, because we did the check. There's European money that is handed over to EU member states, and in total for tourism, it's 17 billion euro. That comes on top of what member states spend anyway on tourism and support for the tourism companies, the regional, national programs. So there is money. One thing that, of course, we will want to check, and drafting the strategy for sustainable tourism is a perfect example to do that, is to see is there something we can do differently or better? But I have to make a caveat. We are just embarking on the discussions on the next multi-annual financial framework, which translates into the next EU budget. And these will be difficult discussions because the situation when it comes to finances in member states is what it is. But that's the money question. But again, the strategy that you heard from the Commissioner we are working on, I'm confirming now, don't look at it as a piece of paper that will be just drawn somewhere. There will be a process where I hope many of you will be involved, helping us to draft that strategy so that it really points to areas which are important. And for that event like today is a perfect occasion. One comment on Brand Europe, and I found it very interesting. I'm wondering, and this is really my question to you, is Brand Europe outside Europe the same that we need to have as Brand Europe inside? I don't have the question, but I don't have the answer, but I think it would be a very interesting thing to ask EU citizens. You know, maybe we ask different things from Europe that tourists coming into the European Union would like to see. But this discussion on Brand Europe is definitely ahead of us.
Fantastic perspective. May I just add one element here that I feel that is a little bit missing, because we are talking about the different aspects of tourism. But I want to underline one thing, and I firmly believe in it. Tourism is made of people. The reason why we love tourism so much is it's a fantastic economic sector, but it's a sector of the people, for the people, made of people. There's no AI substituting the personal experience, and which is the one-on-one human touch. I think we must be aware of something. COVID took away 62% of the workforce for tourism, especially in Europe. So if we want to put a lot of effort in the sector, we need to consider the fact that we must also side with initiatives. Yep. And I think together with Brand Europe, that's also another interesting point of focus for example, training for funding. We must get people back into the sector. We must talk to the younger generations. We must train them. We must give them an opportunity and allow them to think that tourism is a career. It's part of a career. And this applies for our countries. We have a lot of issues with seasonality and things. But I think that if there's also a European effort, that is going to be the biggest gift that we receive in the tourism industry.
But it's interesting what you say, because it goes a little bit against what we heard this morning from Glenn Fogel, which is this idea that AI would help us enhance our performance or our experiences when we travel.
No, I don't think it's excluding. First of all, I think AI has millions of applications, and I think one of the best applications of AI in tourism is how to better interpret tourism data. We have a plethora. Well, let's not get into the data thing. It's going to take us another 2 hours and a half. But the thing is, we have a plethora of data coming from everywhere. We're very much historically driven. We were very good in 2023, which touristically means absolutely nothing. So AI is a great tool for this. But AI is not going to do anything to substitute the human experience. And bear in mind, whatever marketing effort we do, our best result, I think, I'm talking here too as well, great mature markets that have invested in tourism so much, there's nothing like word of mouth. And word of mouth means personal experience. And we cannot absolutely think that someone else or some machine is going to do it on our behalf.
I can see a lot of people in the room smiling and a little bit relieved to hear you say that. Nicolina, you had a point to make?
Yes, I just wanted to comment. It's great to have, so you said 17 billion. But it's great to have this amount of money, but it's structured through all the different programs. It's very difficult for small and medium enterprises and large enterprises, not only for them and local communities and all others who want to apply, to find it on one place. That's why we need to have dedicated line for the financing in the tourism sector. That's only the problem, because the people, they don't have the people also who are going to look for everything, don't know how to apply on everything. So it's a problem if you don't have dedicated line for tourism sector. That's my opinion, because if we are talking about sustainability is costing something. I know it because we had, with the great help of the Commission, we got I think about 300 million euros through RRF. Guidance with the Commission. We did a huge reform of tourism sector. First step, the Act on Tourism. Second step, also we implemented all of the sustainability in all of our projects which are financed. We are really doing the amazing thing at home. I think it is going to be changing the face of the Croatian tourism in 2026 when it's supposed to finish all of the projects. But, as I said, sustainability costs something. If we want to have solving the problems of seasonality, over-tourism, climate changes, and so on, we have to invest in infrastructure first. Infrastructure, an example as we did it in, for example, health tourism and active tourism. I will just mention those two fields because it's important, because then you are solving a year-round tourism, what you want, but as I said, through all of the criteria of sustainability, which had to be inside, and I'm very grateful for the help of the Commission, because without them and OECD, we couldn't done all of these investments and all of this reconstruction and all huge reform of all our tourism sectors. So funding is very important. Dedicated line, which is simplified, which President of the Commission announced. So no dedicated line. We talked about in the hearings with the Commissioner about the dedicated line, and I think that he understands the problem, why we need a dedicated line. I said the President of the Commission announced simplification of legislation, and that is also important for all of our businesses, small, medium and large businesses in tourism.
Indeed, Daniel, you might want to make a point there that we need to be better prepared. We need better climate adaptation as well, as we see these adverse weather patterns be more and more frequent in Europe.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I cannot agree more with what was said, as I mentioned earlier, both with regards to jobs, job shortages, and also to funding. What we didn't mention is also the supporting of digitalization from the EU side, not just from the private sector, when it comes, for example, to visa processes, the harmonization of safety and health protocols to enhance traveler confidence. Because and traveler certainty, those are also key elements. But when it comes to preparedness, we must leverage also existing initiatives like that of ESMA to have a permanent resilience framework and a permanent tourism crisis recovery task force, for example, so that we are better prepared to deal with future crises. Because obviously, as the pandemic has shown us, we were caught a bit red-handed, but no one had a pre-advance notice of what was coming. So I think we must learn from our experiences, because we have huge potential. So what I would like to see in the coming months and years is not reinventing the wheel necessarily, because the will is there, the experience is there, but harmonizing a coherent approach, a unified approach. And one of the things which I am discussing and pushing forward is also the idea of having a European Tourism Union, which is more akin to the Health Union. I'm not talking about a completely new agency, but I'm talking about a unified, coherent approach which maximizes existing resources, brings people together, creates a European Tourism Forum, brings member states, brings MEPs, brings stakeholders together.
Is that a good idea, Magda?
On a European
union, tourism union?
We need
I can see already the headlines.
No. I will not. I'm not committing to anything. But I think I always say when I get that request is, let's discuss exactly what this union should deliver on. Let's see whether by any chance we already have instruments in place that can deliver. Because what I really don't like to see is overlaps and duplication.
The scope is
we are so good at creating layers upon layers upon layers. Let's see whether we can actually streamline and make things easier.
That is exactly the scope of my thoughts. So streamlining. And there is also a clear political mandate, because during the last mandate, MEPs actually voted with a strong majority to have a European Tourism Union. There was a vote on the Sustainable Tourism Strategy, and the vote included also a clear mandate to have the establishment of a tourism union.
Okay, we started the panel by asking the audience that question, which is, what do you consider the most important initiative by the new Commissioner and DG for Tourism to enhance Europe's competitiveness as a tourism destination? And our audience, the majority, said prioritising multimodal travel and investing in rail infrastructure.
Thank you so much for that.
So there you go. Not good news, though, for Olivier.
Well,
It's multimodal.
I think we need that, of course, but we also need to solve the airport capacity crunch that is looming and decarbonize aviation.
Because airports are hubs, indeed.
Yes.
Perhaps the same question very briefly to all our panel before we wrap up and go for a coffee. Same question to you on the priority. What do you think should be the most important initiative by the European Commission? So number one thing that they should do.
Well, I don't like rankings. I think all the things that are there are in absolutely the same level of importance. The main thing is how you do it, and how you deliver. So I think we're hitting on a very good starting point, which is listening, putting everything together, and then I think prioritization comes naturally. It's not just let's start from here, because it's very circular. So it doesn't matter where you start. It's how you do it, how you deliver, and how you keep it going. Governance doesn't necessarily solve, but helps, definitely.
Daniel, same question to you.
I would just refer back to the commissioner's speech this morning. So let's implement his vision.
Let's implement his vision. Short and sweet. That's what we like. Magda?
I think the opportunity that comes from having a very clear recognition that tourism matters, because there's a commissioner who has tourism in his title, is actually to make sure that whatever that sector needs, going miles beyond transport in terms of economy, support for SMEs, skills, people, that it is all properly reflected across all policy areas that European Union takes care of. And I think, I know it's been happening, but from all the discussions I have had, it's probably this question of this additional visibility, this additional push to make sure that the interests and needs of a very important economic sector are not overlooked.
And just this competitive compass, do you think that will do the trick to make Europe more competitive?
Well, let's see. Every paper is valid and means as much as its implementation. But I think the commitment to make Europe more competitive is there. And if we can find a way to, and thank you for this question, if we can find a way to stronger link tourism with what is traditionally perceived as Europe's competitiveness, we will win, all of us.
We'll be on the right track. Thank you so much, Magda, for that. Olivier, what about yourself?
Well, I think there cannot be a tourism strategy in Europe without an aviation strategy at the same time. And today, if I look at the competitiveness compass, there's no aviation strategy. So I think it's high time that we rebalance things and get that aviation strategy, which means being included in the clean aviation deal for our decarbonization. Otherwise, again, we're going to go against the wall.
I'm sorry, may I come in?
Sure.
Rail, roads, air. There's a maritime strategy as well that is needed. I mean, we have the Mediterranean, especially as Mediterranean countries. We definitely should not, should not take that aside. Definitely, it's maybe in the discussion is we need to, remind everyone that we need. I mean, we're in water. We're a peninsula. I mean, Croatia, Malta. I mean, we need to consider the maritime strategy as well as part of the whole deal.
Thanks for making that point as well. And Nicolina?
3 things. First thing, simplified legislation. Second, skilled workers, because it's important for our workforce in the hospitality sector. And third, dedicated budget line for tourism.
Dedicated. Always starts with money and ends with money. Nicolina Brnčak, Croatian MEP from the European People's Party, thank you so much for being with us. Olivia Janovec, the Director General of Airports Council International Europe, thank you as well for being with us. Magda from DG Move, the Director General, it was lovely as well having you. And Daniel Artar from Malta, it was great as well to have your perspectives, and also the Italian perspective from Alexander Pirante. Thank you so much for your insights. And thank you so much to our audience, and of course all those tuning in online. It's time for us to take a little break here from our live show here in Brussels, all about Destination Europe, making this continent the most attractive place to visit. We'll be back very soon, but for now, thanks for watching. Welcome back to Destination Europe, live here on Euronews. This is brought to you in partnership with the European Travel Commission. It's a conversation, a dialogue all about the future of the travel industry, a sector that represents almost 10% of our GDP here in the European Union. This afternoon, we'll be sitting down with members of the European Parliament, representatives from the tourist sector, those working day to day in this industry. They have the solutions, they have the answers, and they want to make their point across to regulators in Brussels and also to the European Commissioner in charge of sustainable travel and tourism, who this time next year will be coming out with a new sustainable tourism strategy. So a little bit later, we'll be sitting down here with those guests and experts. But first, it is time to get some data, some information on travel trends for last year. And for this, I'm delighted to say we have with us here George Simon from MasterCard. So please help me in putting your hands together to welcome him. Welcome. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Maeve, and thank you to our hosts, Euronews and the European Travel Commission, for bringing us together for a truly insightful look into the future of European tourism. I'm George Simon, and I have the privilege of leading MasterCard's European market development efforts. Like much of the audience, I'm passionate about travel in both my personal and professional lives. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you about the key trends which will drive future travel behaviors. However, you might be wondering, if Maeve didn't leave it out, why MasterCard? Why are we presenting here today among tourism and government leaders from Europe? As a global technology company in the payment sector, MasterCard's mission is to power economies and to empower people and businesses. Simple. Power economies and empower people to make the right choices and to empower businesses to thrive. Last year alone, our network facilitated more than 190 billion transactions in the last year, across 200 countries and territories in more than 150 currencies. Every time people swipe, tap, dip, or simply log in and put their MasterCard, it's based because they trust us for the information that they send us. In 2023, we launched here in Europe, in Madrid, the Tourism Innovation Hub, an ecosystem that brings together destinations, travel partners, issuers, and MasterCard's team of experts to work together to develop tourism corridors and to foster more sustainable tourism industry. We are able to do this because we have an unparalleled view of global consumer spending. Petabytes, terabytes, I don't even know what data category we would say. Everything that people use a MasterCard, we see. And it is anonymized. It's aggregated, so we don't have personal information, but we know how people perform and the behaviors. So with this increased transparency for tourism ministries and destinations to future-proof tourism strategies for all types of travelers. I'm talk a little bit about the trends, and I'll deep dive into some of these. In today's evolving world, travelers' motivations, preferences, and emotions are ever-changing. And this is especially true in Europe. There are also simply more people traveling once again. 5 years on from the pandemic, what we all faced, and various crises that have happened throughout that period. Tourists are increasingly seeking to visit destinations offering unique experiences. And they prefer greater autonomy over their booking experience, where they can leverage new and existing channels and be rewarded for their loyalty. Above all, modern travelers want to travel smarter. Tourists want to visit destinations that are fully digital, enabled across the entire tourism ecosystem, including small businesses. And you've heard the Commissioner talk about small businesses, you've heard panelists talk about it. It's the economy, it's the backbone of the economy. And last but not least, the experience economy is booming, playing a significant role in travelers' motivations. So while the recovery of the sector has been tremendous, especially after the setbacks it faced, and even after that, a further pivot, we feel, is needed by destinations to respond to these changes, the trends, and some of the challenges that were addressed as well. Looking at the recovery of the sector more closely, and everyone's talked about it, 2024 was in fact a record-breaking year. After a broad-based recovery across the global travel and tourism sectors in 22, and we saw further acceleration in 23, last year saw a return to pre-pandemic levels in terms of visitor arrivals. But the world hasn't stood still. We now have 7.4 billion consumers across the world. So the pie has grown, everything is back to the way things were. And in some places, like Europe, while it's showing just a 1% increase, its absolute terms, these levels were surpassed than from pre-pandemic years. That's what the UN Tourism Barometer reporting. If we peel the onion a little more, outbound travel demand into Europe is gradually continuing to expand from both nearby destinations, maybe even Europeans traveling from the north to the south, but from faraway destinations. For example, travel from China to Europe has almost surpassed 2019 levels, and the Chinese are a key constituent for European tourism. Positively, we expect the numbers of visitors coming to Europe to grow further. According to our host, the European Travel Commission, 83% of surveyed Chinese travelers expressed a desire to visit Europe. That's even up 10% from last year. This sets big expectations for the continued growth of tourism across Europe, bringing with it major economic benefits. But it also creates challenges for destinations in the form of tourist hotspots, a topic our next group of panelists will deep dive into. However, to mitigate this, MasterCard has been leading several projects in Europe to redistribute tourism flows to lesser-known areas, with the objective of reducing tourist hotspots, while retaining and growing the economic value of tourism overall. As an example, our project called Essence of Seville, aims to develop the China-Seville corridor, promoting through public and private collaboration, airlines, online travel agents, the municipality of Seville, and by uniting the entire tourism value chain, Chinese tourists in the Spanish city in a targeted, strategic, and a sustainable manner. Sticking with some of the trends which we believe will translate into economic benefit. Travelers are also prioritizing leisure for longer, particularly for low-cost destinations, as MasterCard's Economic Institute analysis from last year indicated. Tourists are traveling more and for longer, with the average tourist visiting Europe spending more time on vacation, about 2 extra days relative to pre-COVID levels. This is fantastic for the economy. Our analysis tells us that the longer stays at destinations generally translates to more spend per trip, which benefits local businesses and can be a substantial force in increasing and sustaining the local economy. Moreover, tourists in Europe are shifting away from summer travel to what we call shoulder season, according to our data, reducing the pressure on destinations during the peak time. Some detail on this shoulders, and I know this is a colorful slide. This slide is real 2024 spend by month by tourists, inbound tourists, at restaurants in European markets. Although in terms of the most popular spending months, it still remains. It's the sunny ones, the summer ones, where our kids have holidays, we take them to the beach. So July, August, all across Europe. The exception being Austria, where you see December, March, ski season, top months for tourism spend. But you will see what we have seen over time, a little bit of that shoulder season moving not directly in the main summer months, but overlapping a little bit more. And with tourists spending 2 extra days and perhaps more over time, and in low-cost destinations. If I remember well, Tirana was one of the most visited sites. Who would have thought? Munich was next. So these are evidences and trends that people and tourists are seeking new types of experiences. So how are travelers booking their trips? This is where we come to our field, money. There has been a shift in how tourists are choosing to plan and book travel in general. In recent years, banks and credit cards have made major inroads in the channels and travelers are using to book, with Gen Z particularly leading the pack. So for those destinations looking to attract US travelers, and these slides are US data, you can see that this trend is playing out with American tourists across. As I mentioned in my introduction, loyalty also remained paramount, as have reward programs from online travel agencies and airlines. We work closely with Booking, one of our hosts and sponsors. So they're highly valued by travelers, incentivizing guests to book directly, fostering brand loyalty, and ultimately regain lost ground in what is an increasingly competitive environment. Organizations like Skift are also seeing purchasing trends changing, especially, again, younger generations, who they report are making more travel reservations through loyalty and credit card booking platforms, signaling this larger shift is set to continue. What is important to note is that this desire to do things differently things digitally does not end with the booking process. When arriving at a destination, being able to pay digitally with the cabbie, with transport, is so important. And the young generation, the mobile phone is what they do. They don't even pick up the card. This includes transit and transportation into the cities being digitalized. While it is the norm in most large businesses and operations and shops, many small businesses are still missing out. They lack the capabilities to become really digital. To overcome this and to ensure SMEs can share the economic benefits of tourism, we've partnered at the Commission with tourism initiatives like MasterCard Strive. For example, in Spain, again, I'm using a Spanish example, I wonder why. Through this program, we've engaged with over 100 hotels with fewer than 100 rooms in partnership with Connectis, a hotel industry technology platform. Together, we are helping these smaller hotels reach new customers, make and receive digital payments, so very smoothly, and access AI-driven enabled insights to inform their operations. And regarding AI, which is the buzzword, and Glenn at Booking talked about this, we're working with several European cities to continue to advance the use of data intelligence applications for the tourism sector. Together, we've developed platforms where SME tourism businesses can gain insights derived from trusted sources of data, meaning MasterCard, powered by artificial intelligence, leveraging responsible AI to support innovation for SMEs. The hotel, the airline should just be doing what they do best. But the process of booking, paying should be seamless. And with this comes a whole bunch of data on how SMEs are developed. They need working capital. And with the data, we can always see where these things can flow through. So banks have better data, better knowledge to promote what small businesses can do. We've touched on how the desire for digital booking and payment options have grown, but what are tourists spending their time and money on? Our data shows that there's been a sustained surge in the experience economy, as consumers are prioritizing spend on experiences instead of things, with travel unsurprisingly at the top of the list. In 2024, 9 in 10 tourists plan to spend the same or more in experiences versus 2023. More specifically, in countries such as France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, we can see how the spend mix has shifted towards restaurants, grocery and entertainment, away from lodging and ATMs. ATMs is a clue that everyone's become digital. Nobody's using cash anymore. And tourists are increasingly seeking to visit destinations offering unique experiences that fuel their passions. Memorable events that are also driving travel trends, with 40% of people saying they would opt to travel to another country had they heard their experience that they are passionate about. Our data shows the positive impact that events have on the economy of a particular destination. Some of you might have heard of the Swift lift. That's the Eras concert, Taylor Swift coming in, the entire economy around that concert booms. We see the same thing with Champions League. We see the same thing with Cannes Film Festival, Berlinale, Venice. So there's enough data to show us that events and unique experiences are important. Let me just recap. This process starts with redefining destination strategies to align with the needs of the new traveler. Within this, developing alternative sub-destinations to better distribute tourism is very important to the challenge of the hotspots. Design smarter campaigns to attract travelers that bring higher value to the destination. To name a few opportunities, think about how to encourage longer stays, offer tailored experiences, and promote travel beyond the summertime peak into season. Leverage the new role of banks and loyalty programs to reach and inspire travelers at the initial phase of the travel planning process. Support the digitalization of the tourism industry. That's an agenda for everyone, especially small businesses which can struggle to accept digital payments and who may lack an online presence. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, lean into and harness the power of data. It's the new goal, to attract more purpose-driven travelers who want to make more sustainable choices and to leave a positive bearing on the destinations they visit. DMOs, destination management organizations armed with insight, which we work with, enhanced marketing capabilities, more funding, can move beyond the mere insightful to actually the transformative, and to offer unique experiences to the traveler. Take Belgium, for example, for no particular reason, if only that this is where we are here today. This country, relatively small in size, hosts the biggest electronic musical festival in the world in the summer, Tomorrowland. People travel into an otherwise unknown town in the Flemish countryside from all over the world. But in many cases, their experience starts much earlier. Airlines prepare some of their aircraft and charters for them to start getting into the festival mood before they even set foot in Belgium, with DJs and light shows and onboard. That's the marketing at the entry point. When they arrive at Zaventem, Brussels airport, they're welcomed with gigs and other music shows. Many often they go on to visit Brussels, Antwerp, before they head to the festival grounds. This is just but one example. There are many more all across Europe. Festivals are key to attracting global tourism, but it shows that experiences that people cherish can be built in all stages of the journey, not just at the final stage. Europe has an unparalleled wealth of cultural, culinary, sports, and leisure activities to offer, assets, and with iconic cities, beaches, and various other assets. 10% of EU's GDP is from tourism. If we're not the most competitive bloc, then shame on us. And it's just got to get better. At MasterCard, we're working with 40+ destinations in Europe to build a more sustainable and resilient tourism industry in this way, working with the European Travel Commission. Together with all of you, both from the public and private sector, we can develop Europe's tourism success story further by offering travelers even better, unique, and personal experiences, creating memories that last a lifetime. Thank you for your time today. I'm now going to hand it over to a fantastic panel session on striking the balance, sharing tourism benefits beyond hotspots. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, George Simon, there from MasterCard, with that fascinating insight and intel into our travel trends. And a reminder to us all, if we do want to catch a festival, to get booking it as soon as possible, because of course that Swift lift, it was really tricky to get those tickets as it was for the likes of Beyonce. But fascinating presentation there from George Simon, and really set us up for our next panel, because the headline, of course, today is that tourism is back in Europe. It's booming, but that peak destinations are suffocating, and you're seeing a bit of a brunt from locals. So this next panel will look into how to make sure that locals are part of the conversation, and that the economy as well is felt in their pocket, that they feel the positive benefits of all the people visiting their spaces. So for this panel, I'm delighted to say we have an array of brilliant speakers, some policymakers, some from the European Parliament, and others working in tourism day to day. So without further ado, we can start inviting them up on stage. Sandra Carvao is the Director of Market Intelligence, Policies and Competitiveness at the UN Tourism, and she is our first panelist today. Sandra, thanks for coming to Brussels to be with us. And George Simon alluded to some of the data that you've been looking into, so you can enlighten us now in just a minute. But first, let's bring up Sergio Gonçalves. He's a Portuguese member of the European Parliament. He's from the Socialists and Democrats Party, and he originally stems from Madeira. So another man who knows a lot about tourism. Welcome. We're also joined by Zina Benchik. She is the Managing Director for Europe, the Middle East and Africa of Intrepid Travel. Zina, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Zina is based in Casablanca, is pretty much digital nomad, so we're thrilled that you made the trip to Brussels to be with us here at the Destination Europe Summit. And then from my home country, from Ireland, I'm thrilled to welcome from Fáilte Ireland, the CEO, Paul Kelly. Welcome. For those not familiar, the word Fáilte is the Irish word for welcome, and Fáilte Ireland is, of course, Ireland's National Tourism Authority. So great to have you, Paul, with us. And last but not least, a very hardworking policy officer from the European Commission, who just this week moved into DG Move. I'd like to invite up on stage Marlène Barthès. Welcome. So thank you so much. Delighted to be surrounded by such brilliant brains. Thank you for being with us. We'd also like this time to make sure we do bring in the questions from the audience. You have the Slido there. Some of the ones we didn't get around to earlier, we will do so during this panel. And we also kick off with a question for our audience, which is quite precise on which actions would you like to see included in the upcoming tourism strategy. So while you take a look at that, we can kick off with our panel. Because, of course, this tourism sector, it's always been known as one of happiness, as one of escapism, but we've seen a lot of pretty grim negative reports in the media of late discussing mismanagement of tourism, local pushbacks, and there, of course, what captures then the attention of the media and therefore the public, and is creating this negative impact of the sector, which is damaging the reputation. Sandra, I'd like to start with you, just to bring in the work of the UN Tourism field. You're monitoring these perceptions of tourism globally. So what trends have you observed?
Thank you all. Good morning. Bonjour. Pleasure to be here on behalf of UN Tourism. I think the first important point is, for the first time in many, many years, we're talking about measuring community perceptions as one indicator. So there's a very important policy shift here, which is we're not just working towards the sector growth, the development, but we're really centering it in where it happens, the place. Having said that, it takes us to the importance that that measurement happens at local level. We were talking before. There's a diversity of situations, circumstances, carrying capacity is different, infrastructure is different. So measuring perception of residents needs to be done in each country, in each destination. And the good thing as well is that for the first time, it's actually recognized by the UN Statistical Commission as one of the areas that has to be measured by countries in the framework of measuring sustainability of tourism. So I think there's a big step forward that was given. The measurement at global level is important for benchmarking, but we really need to look at the local level. And we're very happy that we know countries like Spain are doing a pilot already on that. I know Ireland is also doing work on this. So there's a lot of countries who are advancing. it's important to advance at national and at local level. But just to give you an idea as well, prior to the pandemic in around 2018, we did with a company a survey around 15 countries. And the interesting thing is that 46% of the people thought there was overcrowding. But when they were asked about the measures that they thought were important to implement, because it's not only the perception, it's also to understand what measures are effective, the first one was infrastructure development with 72%. The second was creating experiences that benefit residents and visitors at the same time. And only 12% of the people talked about limitation of numbers. So it's a balance and it's a management issue. And I think this is 2 points. It's important to measure. It's important to do it consistently and include it as a policy element in your planning and in your destination management.
Well, you mentioned Ireland, and in fact, you've rolled out a brand new sustainable tourism strategy, which keeps in mind the locals and their needs. Can you tell us more about it, Paul?
Yes, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now. Yeah, we've recently launched a new policy framework in Ireland, and that's kind of embedded into codified in policy what we've been doing for the last number of years, which is taking on the United Nations kind of tourism best practice in terms of sustainable tourism development, which looks at the needs not just of the visitor and the industry, but the new policy really dials up the community and the environment. We're lucky in Ireland in that we have a really high tourism approval rating, probably the highest in the world. Over 70% of local residents are positive towards tourism, and we measure that at a local as well as a national level. So, you know, we're naturally a welcoming nation. Our communities are love having tourists in and love kind of meeting and engaging with tourists. But, you know, in terms of so the new policy kind of codifies that, but really important is that we need to keep engaging the local community in how we develop tourism and have their voice at the heart, and we do that. We develop as a national organisation. We're in the process of rolling out local tourism plans for practically every county in Ireland, and within that, the voice of the host community is at the heart of how we're developing tourism in those areas. The other big thing, I suppose, is around the environmental and sustainability and embedding that more into our overall policy. And one of the things we heard from the aviation sector earlier. One of the things we're looking at is, in terms of the markets that we target with our colleagues in Tourism Ireland, we target those markets where we can get the maximum revenue into the local economies from the carbon emissions that need to be generated in aviation, because we're an island nation, so you've got to fly to get there. So we look at that, but then also an awful lot of work decarbonising the tourism sector on the ground, working with businesses to help them to measure their carbon through carbon calculators and then reduce their carbon footprint through various measures.
And just, you mentioned sustainability and the goals there. I'm looking at yourself from Madeira, a beautiful island, but it's also known as a sustainable tourism destination. How did you manage to get that stamp?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for having me here, and ATC as well. It's a great honor, but also a big pleasure for me, because over the last years, 90% of my professional career was as a tourism and transport professional, not as a politician, and I'm only an MEP for 6 months, so it's very good to be with the tourism sector, with the stakeholders, and discuss these issues. With regards to Madeira, we have a sustainability strategy. At the moment, we're one of, I believe, the only 2 regions. There are several municipalities and cities that are certified as a sustainable tourism destination in the EU. But the regions, I believe it's only Azores and Madeira, both in Portugal, both outermost regions of the EU. And this is a strategy that included the companies, the public sector, all the stakeholders. And it's very important to position ourselves as a sustainable destination. But we have many other previous initiatives to achieve that. I see, for example, entering here the Outer World, I see that it has the Green Key certification. We have dozens of hotels and entities in Madeira with the Green Key certification. I believe it's the region in Portugal that has more certifications. We developed incentives public incentives for having electric cars, not only for locals but also for companies. At the time when I used to work at the airports, we had incentives for off-peak changes in the timetables in the flights, so that we could have flights in days where we have less pressure. So many measures that all together made us possible to get the certification to be a sustainable tourism destination. And I believe that's the way we should do things. But we have obviously challenges that we share with most of other destinations, other regions. The discussion on over-tourism, everything that's related to infrastructure, to accessibility, with the Green Deal, for example, being on an island, we have airports, we have ports that are essential for our mobility and also to supply the islands. And I was noticing in the previous panel we were discussing the SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel, and if it's expensive or not, or if it's available or not. When you're on an island or an outermost region, you have a different challenge. You have also to find the way to store it, to transport it to the island, and to make these huge investments on small-scale regions, small-scale companies, small-scale markets. So it's a big challenge that we have ahead of us, and we need to address that with different policies within the EU.
And all those challenges are being heard by Marlene, who, of course, works for the European Commission and will be working behind the scenes, writing a number of papers and documents over the next couple of months as you roll out that EU tourism strategy. Do you think it will build trust then and improve perhaps the image of the sector, Marlene?
Well, I do hope so. We don't know yet what will be in the strategy, but what we know is that we will design it collectively. So the idea here is really to have large stakeholder consultations involving all parties, including local authorities, civil society, young people. So really make sure that we get their contribution, which should help, I think, in acceptance, in trust in the whole process. But not only that, I think also with implementation. We have to keep in mind that tourism is primarily a member state competence. So we need to work together with member states, with regions, to make sure that whatever we design is also implementable then by them on the ground. And I think one way to do this is also to, and the discussions today show it quite well, is to spin the message positively. Sadly, tourism is often used as a scapegoat for other issues. I mean, housing issues was mentioned, pollution, water scarcity, congestion. But if done right, and I think we all agree here in this room, tourism is good, and we actually do want more tourism. So it's a matter of streamlining what we're doing at EU level. So the strategy hopefully will help with that. So working on affordable housing, short-term rentals, a big problem, so making it more transparent, helping local authorities manage this issue. Data availability, I think, is also a big topic that we need to focus on, and we are working on with a data space for tourism. So making sure that we also have the necessary information to disperse visitor flows, etc. So I think the strategy, and it was mentioned earlier, will streamline a lot of already ongoing efforts and work and build on that.
Okay, and that's where perhaps, Zina, you could come in now with some knowledge from the ground on how you're actually selecting and working with local providers in Intrepid.
Absolutely. Well, can I first thank you for having me, because it's great to have some space for the private sector as well and be able to really talk about how we are facing these challenges as well. We are a global purpose-led tour operator. We operate in 100 countries for a very large number of customers, experiences that take them under the skin of a destination, to lesser-known places, to meet with the local communities, to interact with them, try the local foods, use the public transport. And that form of travel has become very much a trend now, and something we are hearing about a lot. But we've been here for 35 years, and so that's really something that's core to our business. And the reason we decided to structure our company as, to answer your question, as a vertically owned business, which means that we have in every single country we operate large volume our own local team with our own local guides that are able to contract suppliers in a way that we can spread those tourism euros evenly, fairly, making sure that our supply chain is majorly locally owned and it's supporting the local economy and having this positive impact. And that structure is not a structure that's very common in the private sector. And this is why we have done it, because that's the only way for us to be able to ensure. And as a result of that, around 90% of our supply chain is locally owned. That's globally. But to talk about Europe specifically and the challenge that Europe presents to us, it's only 72%. 72% is a really good rate if you put it in the context of the travel industry. But for us, is low. And the reason for that is because Europe has been built, or the tourism industry of Europe has been built in a model that doesn't really fit our style. And so while we have been growing Europe very significantly, we want to do more. We are facing the challenge that the supply chain and industry in Europe has been built on a model that needs to change if we want to make it more sustainable, more community-centric, and more impactful.
That's somewhere where you could help out now as an MEP. Only a new MEP. I'll give you a minute to think about that and bring in Paul, because of course you're involving now local communities in tourism, because many people, when they go to Ireland, they fly into Dublin and tend to stay there, perhaps maybe visit the west of Ireland. How are you trying to make sure that other areas of Ireland are also visited and also can reap the benefits of all these visitors coming to the island?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky in Ireland that the structure we have is predominantly a national structure, and lots of other countries kind of organise, you know, the resources and the funding tend to sit in the cities or the regions. But being a national structure, we can really invest and manage the spread of tourism right throughout the country, and that's a huge focus for us in order to, and as a result, the way we've grown tourism over the last 10 or 15 years has been much more spread across the country. So every part of Ireland is part of one of our regional experience brands. We have 4, the Wild Atlantic Way, Dublin, Ireland's Hidden Heartlands, and Ireland's Ancient East are our 4 regional experience brands, and they cover every part of the country, and then we manage and build out the experiences. And it's, you know, many people, when they think about tourism, they start with marketing and promotion, but the most important thing is the visitor experience on the ground. So, you know, in terms of, we do market and promote those 4 brands, of course, but it's about building the experience. One of the most popular sites in Ireland is the Cliffs of Moher. Many people are familiar with it, spectacular cliffs on the west coast of Clare. But we are developing other experiences similar to that in less developed areas. We've invested significantly in the cliffs in Slieve League and Donegal in the northwestern part of Ireland, and that's just one example of where we're providing a similar but different experience in a different location that is an underdeveloped tourism location, and bringing visitors to that. So it is about investing, and it was spoken earlier about the need for that infrastructure. So, you know, in terms of, and I think Glenn spoke very well around, people will want to go to Paris, you know, in France, and people in Ireland will want to go to, they'll want to go to Dublin, they'll want to go to Kerry, they'll want to go to Clare, but it is about creating the reasons to make them to want to go to other areas. And that requires that focused investment over time, working with the local communities, developing in a way that will do that, and then, you know, bring visitors to those areas. So it is about putting resources and energy and time into developing those underdeveloped areas.
And just give us an example of one of these kind of festivals you're developing and how you're attracting people to local regions.
Yeah, I mean, no better example than your own home county, Maeve, of Meath, where, you know, in Maeve's home county, many people might not know, and anyone who carves pumpkins at Halloween or dresses up or anything, it all started in Maeve's home county of Meath several thousand years ago, Halloween, that whole Halloween festival. And we've created a festival to celebrate the origins of that in October, which is the off-season, and Meath wouldn't be one of the tourism hotspots in Ireland, but now we have 50,000 people coming to really small towns, but staying all around the area, filling up the accommodation base all around the area, and creating, and I think George from MasterCard spoke about how important those festivals and events are. So using those kind of festivals and creating those kind of experiences to bring people, give people reasons to visit less developed areas in the off season is a really powerful way of of bringing those areas to the global audience.
Amazing experience, yeah.
Sorry,
Sandra?
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Go ahead, jump in.
but I was so inspired by what was being mentioned in Ireland, and we're seeing that exactly from our global policy perspective, that countries are more and more creating those strategies, financing lines that can actually help disperse, because at the end of the day, what we want is to go beyond the hotspot. And we've started something called Best Tourism Villages, which is an initiative that actually recognizes villages around the world with less than 15,000 inhabitants. And we've seen how, first of all, the pride that's created in their own villages for being recognized and for being visited. We're talking about community sentiment. And that sentiment can be changed by the fact, probably when visitors go to communities in different places by Intrepid, that sense of pride really changes also how they benefit from the sector, how they get engaged, and how then they can work with public and private sector. And we've been seeing for this initiative, for example, which is part of our bigger Tourism for Rural Development program, the importance of having a dedicated vision that is targeted exactly at that. So sorry for interrupting, but
That's what it's all about. It's about a dialogue. But on Intrepid, actually, tell us about exactly what travellers are looking for when they want this special experience, and how the industry can better meet their expectations as well.
Well, you'll be surprised, because 70% of our customers are new customers. It's only 30% that are repeats, and often customers who attract for the first time on an Intrepid trip are not necessarily looking for a village experience. They're looking to go on a tour with a group of people to experience a destination, and they often book the trip because they've seen either Venice or Marrakesh on the itinerary. But what we see in the comments and the feedback that we get from them, as a large majority, it's those sort of experiences that came as the highlight. And those are the reason why they then book again with us. And that's really important for us. We call it a responsible travel feedback. It's something that we actually track on our post-trip feedback methodology. And that's something that's very powerful to what our product does to the customer in terms of educating them to be a better traveler, what they've learned from those community interactions, those village stays, and those interactions with their tour guide as well, the tour leader, who plays a very central part in that.
And Sergio, the majority of us in Europe, we're still travelling in July and August. So how are you dealing with that on the island of Madeira?
Well, that actually doesn't happen so much in Madeira. You have year-round tourism, also due to the nice climate we have. It helps a lot. But if we look, for example, we have a smaller island, which is unknown, Porto Santo, right next to Madeira, which is basically a beach destination, where we have tourists mainly from July to mid-September. And it's a big challenge. And some of the ways that we can fight that, everything starts with infrastructure. And we have in different member states in the EU, we have different stages of development. So some need more infrastructure, some are facing different challenges. But we need infrastructure, we need airports, we need ports, we need roads. Then we need to find somehow some specific events, especially in the off-peak season. For example, Porto Santo, I can give you an example. We have a Columbus Festival, because Christopher Columbus was there. So we have it on an off-peak season, where we bring all the traditional dressing and the ships and everything. So it's a very specific, but anything that you do in terms of events, and I give you another example in Madeira, which is the Flower Festival, which is our peak season, where we have all the hotels booked, all the flights are booked, but it's something that has to do with the island. So I think that this has to do with what Zina was saying as well. We need to be authentic, we need to be unique, and we can only do that if we develop our policies, develop our events based on what's our culture, our tradition, and what basically cannot be copied anywhere in the world, not in Dubai, not in Las Vegas. So any experience that you can have in Madeira or any other European destination, that's unique, that's related to the locals, because when we discuss sustainability as a whole, we discuss it also on a social term. And a good destination, a great destination is only a great destination if it's also a great place to live for locals, to raise families, to work, to live. So that's this holistic approach that we need to have on a tourism destination that will make it sustainable in the
And
long term.
Marlene, how will you be addressing that, trying to find that proper compromise?
It's a difficult issue, and I think the most important thing here is that we do not transfer challenges. So by promoting alternative destinations or diversifying tourist flows, we need to make sure that we actually learn the lessons from those regions and destinations that were or are affected by unbalanced tourism or over-tourism, for instance, and make sure that we don't just transfer tourists and all the challenges linked to that. So we in the European Commission, how do we do this? We usually do it through peer learning and knowledge sharing. And I think the Commissioner mentioned it this morning that they may not grab headlines, but they are game changers. So really this exchange of best practice, collaboration on shared challenges and solutions, this is what we do best, I would say, at the European Commission. We do work at different layers. So we work with member states, obviously. We do work with destinations and regions directly as well. We do work with SMEs, so the industry, and also at international level. I mean, we have UN Tourism, the OECD, G7, G20. There's also tourism work strand there. So I think all this work happens at different levels. If we now, from the European Commission side, look at member states, how do we help member states ensure that they diversify tourism? We make sure that in their strategies, they ensure that there is diversification, be it through investment in infrastructure, for instance, but also job creation. I mean, workforce or labor shortages are a big issue as well. So if you have alternative destinations, you also have to make sure that they are equipped to welcoming visitors. We also do funding a lot. It was mentioned before. So we have around 17 billion euros from EU funding that is spent on sustainable tourism, and some of it includes promotion of alternative destinations. Actually, some of it is also channeled through the European Travel Commission that is hosting us today. They're doing a great job in helping us promote Destination Europe. But what is Destination Europe? They just launched, actually, quite recently, a new campaign called Unlock an Unexpected Upgrade, which promotes off-season, off-the-beaten-track traveling. So I think that really replies also to that question. We work with destinations, destination management organization as well. Directly, we have a very nice project that I have the chance of managing, which is matchmaking destinations that have similar problems so that they learn from each other. And there's a communication campaign planned there, a lot of best practices, etc. So I think the main problem also is to have an overview of everything that exists, all the tools, all the awards, all the labels that exist at European level and national level. So one thing we try to do is also to streamline all this information, have a sort of one-stop shop for everything tourism related, which is called the EU Tourism Platform. And hopefully this also will facilitate the life of our stakeholders.
Nice, you're keeping very busy there and will be for the immediate future. But we've heard about, today the role of the public and private sector, how they can work together here to address these issues like seasonality. Maybe you can elaborate on that point.
Perfect. No, I think one of it's a very slow change. I was just looking at the data, and actually in 10 years, 1 percentage point was changed in terms of seasonality in the EU. So it's quite, and well, the EU and other destinations have exactly the same challenge because it is not something you can change overnight. I think there has been changes. There are many countries who are working on school schedules in different areas of the country to kind of balance so that all schools can close at the same time and everyone goes on holidays. I think within the EU, it's a good discussion to take forward as well, because at the end of the day, holidays are determined often by school holidays.
And in Belgium, you're fined if you take your kids out of school. Yeah.
And I think there's also a good opportunity with working from home. We've seen a lot of people extending and taking opportunity, and especially domestic market. We talk about international travel, but also it's very important to consider that in many countries, domestic travel is 50% or more of the income generated by travel. So at the end of the day, working with work-life balance and allowing also for working from home can actually stimulate people to stay that extra day, Monday, Friday, and work from home outside their homes. And then I think definitely each country is different. Seasonality in the EU will be very different from country to country. There has to be very fit-for-purpose strategies where public and private sector come together with specific incentives. Sergio was just mentioning about airline incentives for specific off-peak seasons. And I think there has to be a strategy that brings everyone together to really decrease seasonality, because it's been something that's been discussed for many years, but we do see that the change is very slow, which is perfectly normal because we're talking about changing also habits. We're talking about, it's like going to Paris. Everyone wants to go to Paris, but everyone wants to go to the beach in June, July, and August. So I think there needs to be specific strategies for really addressing seasonality, because it's where the pressure in those hotspots also occur. It's also, I always say that you have overcrowding not in a destination. You have overcrowding in a specific place, in a specific time. So you need to tackle it from both sides.
From those sides. I'd like to bring in Zine on this, but first, Sergio, you wanted to make a comment?
I just wanted to add one thing, agreeing with everything that Sandra just said. Last week in the Transport and Tourism Committee, we had the presentation of a study regarding silver tourism. So for people over 55 years old, this is a segment that we should develop. We should have EU policies directed to this segment, because it's people that have time available, they have money to travel, they can travel in off-peak seasons, many of them are enjoying already their retirement, and they can travel off-peak, and this has many advantages that were on this study as well. You reduce the energy consumption if they live in northern European countries and they go to the south. We save energy, there is healthcare savings as well in the national health system, so lots of advantages. It's a segment that's growing, as we know, so we should bet on that and have specific funding and policies for that.
Yeah. Paul, is silver season something you're trying to...
Yeah, I think, really important. A great phrase I heard recently was, we are all growing into our disabilities. So the idea of accessible and inclusive tourism is not for someone else, it's for all of us. Mm-hmm. And particularly, the numbers of people who are, elderly with additional challenges. They could be, eyesight, mobility, neurodiversity, whatever. The range of those challenges gets greater as we all get older. And as people are getting older, they don't want to stay at home forever. They still want to travel. They still want to get the most of life. And there's a basic human right. They should be able to travel and get the most out of life, whether you've got additional needs as a child or as an adult or as an older adult. But particularly for that older adult sector, improving the inclusion and accessibility of our tourism offering is going to be key to unlocking that. And that is throughout the entire train. We've recently started with a new inclusive and accessibility tourism team within the work we're doing in Fáilte, Ireland, and trying to pilot. We're still very much at the early stages of that journey, trying to pilot it. But that is certainly something that, and it's one of those things that is going to need, support and resource and investment. The private sector are going to need help with that in order to make that journey. And that may be something that might be on the agenda for the new sustainable tourism policy, about how the EU can help us become more inclusive and accessible as a destination.
Zine, is that a priority for Intrepid? And are you targeting the over 65s?
It's great work.
Yeah, I don't know how we moved into accessibility.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic.
Really also keen to comment on the seasonality, but on the accessibility, absolutely in our roadmap, it's something that we want to do. We are very aware that it's very hard to do as well, because we need to do it in a way that it's properly inclusive, and there is so many invisible disabilities, so many areas that needs to be taken into consideration, especially when we operate a style of travel that's adventurous, that takes people to some of the most remote places, etc. So definitely in the roadmap, and something we keen to work in collaboration with the public sector and learn from each other. When it comes to seasonality, there's an interesting stat I wanted to mention, because you said 1% is the shift that's happening. For us, it's 60%. So 60% more booking in shoulder season in Europe. That's what we're experiencing in places like Italy, Spain, Portugal, all the kind of, the ones that usually book in to travel in July and August. And so shoulder season is October, November, or March, April for us. And we see this shift, which is, we believe, a consequence of the kind of the crowd and all the news around the crowd and, the word we don't want to use over tourism that we've been hearing in the media a lot, but also the climate change and the effect in some of the southern part of Europe that climate change had, such as all the disasters and the heat waves in particular. So with seeing these results, we are welcoming it because our model is based on trying to spread tourism dollar also during outside of the season, because we believe it is beneficial for the communities, for the suppliers, etc. And you mentioned incentivizing airlines and other stakeholders. I would say 95% of the tourism industry in Europe is made of SMEs, and SMEs cannot survive, outside of the peak season. This is literally, we often say they need to nail the peak season to be able to continue to survive, and often small operators close during the 6 months of off-season. I was trying to book myself a hotel in Tarifa 2 weeks ago, and it was closed. So I was just wanting to go with my family closer to home, using a train and a ferry, and it was closed due to this whole seasonality issue. So what I would say is the industry needs to shift to give more options for operators to offer product during the shoulder season for private sector, because we see customers wanting to do it.
Yeah. And just briefly,
just sorry, because data matters. It's 1 percentage point. So it actually was 48% in the main 4 months, and now it's around 47.
Okay. And you said 70% of Intrepid travelers are new. Do you have many over 65s?
65 years old?
Many over 65.
Yeah, absolutely. Our fastest growing customer audience is actually plus 55. And so we are attracting more and more people from that average age. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've got lots of questions coming in, so thank you so much for them. We can kick off with a couple of those questions. Perhaps, Marlene, start with you. How is the European Commission addressing the quality over quantity question?
Yes, I mean, we work closely with member states to look at this, also with international partners, actually, so UN Tourism and OECD. I think a lot of what we do is monitoring and also mapping, so data was mentioned. It's important. We have what we call the European Tourism Dashboard. I think maybe you could have a look there. So we, at the EU, we move away from measuring the benefits or the impact of tourism only in economic numbers, so not only quantity, but also in terms of quality, so sustainability, how green is our sector, how digital, how resilient. So I think equipping our member states and then regional and local authorities with data to measure beyond economic impacts, also the quality of tourism is one of the key things that we are undertaking here.
And there's an interesting question there about establishing a tourism crisis response framework to better prepare for future climate disasters, pandemics or wars. Because, of course, anyone reading the news of late, it's pretty turbulent out there.
We do have the civil protection mechanism, so we have a few tools in place at European level, but I know that this is also one of the priorities for the new commissioner, crisis response in tourism specifically. We funded some projects in the past to help destinations have crisis response plans or management plans in place to be able to respond quickly, so this is definitely work that we will keep doing.
And it's up to locals as well also to come in there, local governance.
Yes, with local governments, and one thing in the EU environment that we really need to address is there were rumors about the centralization of the cohesion policy, and I personally think that we should keep it decentralized with local authorities and regional authorities being a part of the decision-making process, also on applying those policies locally. And we cannot forget that cohesion policy is very important also for the tourism sector, but we also need a permanent mechanism to face different kinds of crises, whether it's pandemic or economic, financial, because that has happened in the past, and we need to shift. And sometimes we know the European Union is not so fast in delivering those solutions. So we will really need to work on specific measures to address that when it happens, because we all know what happened with the pandemic, with lots of regions that depended on tourism that were completely shut down. And we had the floods in Valencia, we had fires on my island in Portugal last summer. So we need to address all these issues, and we need to act fast.
We need to act fast and not always playing catch-up, which sometimes it feels like we are. Paul, a question for you perhaps, because Dublin obviously has a bit of a housing crisis. There's a question there. How can we support hotels on their sustainability journey when exclusive green claims legislation will kill sustainability initiatives?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it might be something that our colleagues in the European Union and the Commission can help us with, because obviously we heard earlier about aviation and sustainable aviation fuel and the targets there, and there is moves within transport, both train and also electric vehicles, etc. But the rest of the tourism economy, and I suppose particularly when we look at the carbon footprint of the rest of the tourism economy, the accommodation sector is the next on the list in terms of, so how do we get the right kind of incentives and programs in place to decarbonize the accommodation sector? And that was going to be one of my, when you come to me, what's my ask of the new commission? It was going to be that of the new strategy. In terms of, is there work that can be done to help us all have the same type of, because the Green Claims Directive effectively has made it very difficult for, we heard from Glenn earlier about, kind of certification and providing businesses with that ability to, to communicate the progress they've made on sustainability, and also providing a framework to allow them to motivate them and incentivize them to do that. That doesn't allow for greenwashing, that doesn't allow for misleading of consumers, etc. So we do need, kind of common frameworks, and it should make sense that it is not just at a European level, but even at a global level, that consumers can see it. It means the same thing in different markets. If they see, a green leaf or a green key or a green star or whatever it is, that they know it means the same thing, and that will motivate and incentivize members of the industry to make progress on sustainability and particularly, I suppose, decarbonisation. So I think that's something that that is kind of, the Green Claims Directive is great in terms of it's program. It's taking kind of greenwashing out of and going to build credibility for any sustainability claims. But we just need to have the framework now that we can all use to enable people to make their businesses more sustainable, and then be able to communicate that to their customers in a way that's got credibility and consistency.
And build trust, of course.
I cannot agree more. And I think the risk of not doing that is that we are discouraging the private sector to do anything, really. Because everyone, and we talk among ourselves, just feel that whatever we do, it will be seen as a greenwashing initiative. And that's quite discouraging in a way. So I think I couldn't agree more with what you just suggested.
And I think there is interesting, talking about kind of brand Europe and stuff, and particularly when we look at what's happening across the Atlantic, there is potentially, a real competitive advantage for Europe. If Europe kind of says, right, sustainability is going to be what is at the core of our offering, and a sustainable experience and the carbon footprint, etc., that you create on the ground as a visitor is going to be less, etc. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for Europe to embrace
this is one of our main goals, I would say, under the strategy. So not just be the leading destination, remain the leading destination, but really be the leading sustainable destination. So we're working on that. I mean, you mentioned, it's true, green claims, etc. If I can reassure you, we are in close contact also with our colleagues in the Director General for the Environment to raise the issue also of the tourism industry accommodation. We do have a number of tools already existing in place, especially for tourist accommodation, such as the EU Eco Label, which is kind of recognized a label that shows best of the class students. So that can be used. There's also EMAS, etc. So we do have a few schemes already in place, and also open to international partners, actually. As long as they target the European market, they can also have access to these tools.
And just on the issue of competitiveness there, we've a question, and seasonality addressing that topic. We've a question there. How can businesses like airlines, tour operators and platforms be incentivized to promote off-peak travel, or of course lesser known destinations, which is what we're discussing here? Sergio, you want to tackle that one?
Yes, well, we can have basic incentives to do that, reducing airport charges, having reduced costs to make it more, or at least economically viable. But most of all, we need to develop attractions, events, reasons for people to travel. That's the reason why people travel. So if we develop off-peak events like some that I've mentioned before, we can drive tourism. Also in terms of infrastructures, again, giving the example of Porto Santo Island, it's a small, really small island with 4,000 people. We built a golf course there. So now we have golfers in the winter coming from Denmark to play golf on the island that was basically just a beach resort for Portuguese people. So we can change the destination. We can create new interest or touristic interest issues, so that people will go there, and then whoever delivers the transport, there is no, I don't know any destination in the world that has something to offer that people want to go there, and nobody comes to fly them or to bring them there. So tour operators and airlines will definitely work on that solution if there is a reason for people to travel and there's a will to travel there for that reason. So I think that we need to develop the events and the infrastructures to do that.
There's an easy way to incentivize tour operator to promote lesser known places, as we do, for example. We find it very easy to work with destinations of longer haul area, or places in Asia, places in Africa, who need our type of travel. We find it easy to work with their tourism boards. They want us to come. They appreciate what we bring to their countries. We find it harder with European destinations to do. That's the true reality. So I need to say it in here, because to someone's point this morning, they don't need to promote their destinations. They already get the biggest amount of visitors. I think it was your point. And so I think it's a good problem to have, but it also means that change might not happen as fast because of not necessarily focusing the marketing message toward the right way to travel to those destinations.
Yeah, if I might just add to what Sergio was saying, I think the issue of product development is essential because in this less known hotspots, the Pumpkin Festival or gastronomy, we're seeing Michelin-starred restaurants in the mountains, in villages that no one would think about going. And they become themselves the attractions after which different services can develop around. But there needs to be support for them. That needs to be the infrastructure to get there. There needs to be promotion for the area and facilitate the creation of other support areas. I was in a panel recently with very small operators, and one owner of a small business was saying, I would love to have a restaurant next to me in my area. And it's this composition of the offer that needs to be stimulated from a policy perspective to actually people want to go and not, we were talking yesterday, not be there for 3 hours. No, they want to go and they want to stay and they want to come back again.
And as we heard from George Simon earlier from MasterCard, people want experiences and they even want to stay longer, and they are doing that. So we've just a couple of minutes left just to take a look again at that question that we posed to our audience at the start of this discussion, which was, what would be the one action that you would include in the upcoming European tourism strategy to better spread tourism benefits and reinforce tourism as a force for good? So we can take a look at the outcome there. And number one, right on top, establish a clear goal of increasing tourism's positive impact rather than just focusing on visitor numbers. So perhaps a brief reaction and also an answer to that question from all our panel. Marlon, starting with yourself.
Yes, sure. I mean, I'm not sure if I should answer the question since I will be part of the team actually drafting the strategy. But I'm very curious to hear what everybody has to say and also what the audience put here. I'm happy to say that on the first point, so I establish a clear goal on increasing tourism positive impact. We are going to launch very soon a study actually looking at the economic and social benefits on host communities. So that would be available towards the end of the year, early next year, and this will specifically look at the positive impact. So we're working on that. But if I had to maybe say one initiative that I would like to see on a personal level in there, I think it would be focusing on outreach. So awareness raising, outreach, communication, because I think we've heard it today and you know it quite well. There's a lot happening, but the problem is we need to reach those tiny players. I mean, the 3 million SMEs, the 20 million people working in the industry. And I think this is where maybe we at EU level are struggling. So to really go all the way to the final stakeholder. So in the strategy, I would like to see this somehow addressed.
And I'm sure our viewers on Euronews who are tuning in today and our viewers online have learned a lot about what you're actually doing, specifically in the European Commission, because sometimes it can be slightly mystified as to what is exactly going on. So thank you so much for that. Paul Kelly.
Yeah, well, I suppose in terms of making sure that people are aware of the value of tourism, the value is huge, you know, in terms of way beyond tourism. Quite often the tourism industry talks about visitors and revenue, but, you know, in Ireland the number is 29 cents in every euro that's spent by visitors in Ireland comes back to the exchequer in revenue, and that pays for services for residents, you know, be they health services or security services or education services or whatever. The employment, to over 227,000 people are employed in tourism in Ireland right throughout the country. And it's, you know, the tourism industry needs to tell those stories more, but also has been spoken here about developing tourism in a way that makes places better places to live and work as well as visit. And that brings you know, a huge value. And you know, the amount of, the importance of global connection, particularly in the world today, and the importance of tourism and different people visiting and meeting people from different countries is huge in terms of, for all forms of global cooperation, global trade, global aid, climate change, etc. Having that familiarity and knowledge that people get from visiting each other is so important. So I think, you know, we've got to keep, as a sector and an industry, we've got to keep communicating that to wider society and make sure everyone understands that.
And that's precisely why we're all here today. Zina?
I quite like the first one. So I think that if you look at, you know, the number of visitors we bring to a country, it will be very, very small in comparison with some of the biggest players. But those smaller number of visitors do more in terms of where they stay, how much they spend, how long they stay, and where they go. And I think if we find a way to measure that at the European, you know, destinations level, that actually will have a very, very important impact.
Okay, thank you so much, Sergio.
Well, I think that no one here has any doubts about the positive impact that tourism has. And we should look beyond numbers, of course. We need to address all the sustainability and all its three pillars. But at this time, I think we should focus also on showing people, showing locals that and Europeans that tourism is also an industry of peace. In the time that we're living, I think that we need to enhance that, and we need to address also in terms of the European Parliament, European Union, the Commission, other problems that concern people that has to do with housing, that has to do with the migrations, because we also need, in tourism, we also need that manpower. So we need policies that will solve the housing problem, that will allow migrants to adapt to Europe, to work in the tourism, because we need those people. And basically, with all these solutions, improve also the life for locals and show that tourism is an industry of peace.
Thank you so much for that. Sandra, final word with you.
Yeah, I think I would start with look at the community first. So that should always be the starting point of any policy or any strategy, what the community wants, what the community benefits from, and also ensure that they know that they benefit from it. I think this is, they want ownership, they want to have that feeling, and I think this is very important, coming back to the measurement, to understanding them. I think there's two things, better data, and we've been focusing on volume because this is the data that exists, and it is a challenge, and we all know, to measure other indicators. So there's a huge effort and a huge investment and cooperation that needs to exist to measure other indicators. And once we have them, then we can have adequate policies. And the second thing, I think it's governance. Tourism is probably one of the sectors that touches all parts of our lives, because tourists are temporary residents in a place. They visit a place, they use the same services, the same infrastructure. So we need all the elements of the policy that come together. And I think probably one of the interesting measures would be to have some kind of mechanism where all the people who are working in tourism, the Parliament, the Commission, and everyone responsible can have some kind of coordination mechanism on a regular basis to consult, to advance proposals, and at the same time between commissioners, because many of the tourism issues are actually impacted by other areas. Merlin was talking about environment, so maybe we can have thematic commission materials at least once a year on tourism, so everyone can come together and have the same discussion.
And that was an idea that was pitched as well earlier in our previous panel. And on that point, we can bring this panel to an end. A round of applause, please, for our extremely brilliant panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you to them for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, your know-how on the ground, and best of luck to Marlene and your team putting together that strategy. We'll be keeping a very close eye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have had a lot of food for thought. Today we've heard from the private sector. We have heard from the European Commissioner himself from Greece. We've heard from a number of MEPs who come from prime destinations all across Europe. And we've also heard from you via your questions, so thank you so much for that. One point that did come up a lot as well was Airbnb and how that's having a very negative impact on local towns. We didn't get to address it on that panel, but for more information on that topic or any of the other topics that you've heard today, you can of course dive into Euronews.com. We have a very special vertical dedicated to the topic of travel and also to the topic of green and sustainability. So for any more in-depth knowledge and information, you can of course take a look at that. But for now, we are ready to pass the floor for some concluding remarks to our host as well of today's event from the European Travel Commission, Eduardo Santander, the Executive Director.
Thank you all. This morning, my son and daughter came to me and saying, you came too late last night and you didn't read me a story. So I had to read them the story this morning over breakfast. And the little cute story ended with a sentence to say, I'm glad you came and you stayed. And this is how I would like to thank you all for coming and staying today for the day. A special token of appreciation also goes to our speakers. Really, really good panels. I enjoyed myself a lot listening to each and every one of you. Our partners at Euronews, there's a lot of people you've seen, a lot of people that you haven't seen. Yeah, big applause for them. Our esteemed President Miguel for also always making time to come to Brussels and helping us, our vice presidents, our members present in the room, our associates, and a very special and really token of appreciation and thank you to my dedicated team. Particularly Tatiana, Teodora, Matilde have been very, very dedicated to this event, and I would like them to stand up all together, please. They deserve a round of applause. They really are the people behind this event and making this a reality. So hearing from so many expert speakers has been a true privilege, with each providing valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities facing European tourism. With the first ever Commissioner for Transport and Tourism and the upcoming, so wished, EU strategy on sustainable tourism, we have a unique opportunity to reshape the future of travel in Europe. This momentum cannot be wasted. It must drive us forward to create a more sustainable and enriching tourism landscape. We have to lead by example. We need to rethink the travel experiences we offer and how we inform and empower travelers to make better choices. We need to move beyond the status quo, the famous, we are the first. We don't want to be only the first, we want to be the best too. The best in sustainable practices, the best on sustainability, the best on accessibility, the best on diversity, the best on every single aspect that covers tourism. We need to move beyond those all KPIs and create new ones. We have to give back to local communities, travel more mindfully, and seek out authentic, enriching experiences. But as we conclude today, I want to address not just the policymakers, the businesses, whether big companies or SMEs, or the industry professionals in the room. I want to speak to all of us as individuals, as travelers. Because beyond our roles, whatever you do in life, whether it's shaping tourism, whether it's making policy, we are travelers ourselves. Some of you traveled today, many of you probably. And we all share the experience of exploring new destinations. As travelers, we also have a role to play. We need to change the way we travel. That's why we are transforming how we showcase travel to Europe. Through our consumer brand Visit Europe, we have developed a new narrative. It's called the Unlock the Unexpected Upgrade, to inspire people to see our continent differently. We understand that travelers want to relax on holiday, not to be lectured. Our goal is to flip the script, create a new narrative, and show that mindful travel isn't a burden. It is actually a benefit. Fewer crowds, deeper connections, and a true sense of place. Our future campaign aims to encourage people to travel responsibly, to unlock unexpected upgrade, highlighting the benefits of visiting off-season, exploring lesser-known destinations, using green transport, and supporting local business. I think we heard a lot of that from our speakers today. This new narrative, which we plan to fully launch later this year, reimagines European travel by showing how small choices can unlock incredible, unexpected experiences. Whether it's taking the metro in Porto for exclusive views over the Dom Luis, the first bridge, or exploring the Acropolis in Athens without the crowds by visiting in autumn. To conclude, dear friends, dear colleagues, I want to share a short video that embodies this vision, and let's all unlock an unexpected upgrade for European tourism, striving for a better, more sustainable future, and a peaceful one. Travel is at its core, in the very core of it, and it's an industry of happiness, it's an industry of a force for good. Miguel mentioned that in his speech this morning. We said it's a people-to-people industry, and it's time to restore that sense of joy and purpose. So thank you so much. Once again, we're going to show the video, and I would like to take the occasion also to thank our anchor and moderator, Maeve, for her great job today. Thank you.
Everyone loves an unexpected upgrade. Upscale your stay in ways you'd never imagine. Unlock a richer experience with fewer crowds and more affordable options.
I went to Europe in the fall to indulge in the wine harvest season. I learned the secrets of winemaking in France, gazed at the unique landscapes, and toasted new, long-lasting friendships.
I swapped the bustle of the big city for Graz, Austria's hidden gem. I exchanged long lines for exclusive views and crowd-free cultural heritage.
I biked the Art Cities route in Belgium for a front row seat and priority access to culture and nature. I took the smarter route through the fragrant countryside.
I loved Orma's Chestnut Festival in Greece. Dining and celebrating with the locals, I could savor secret recipes and unknown flavors. I uncovered the charm of local living.
Whether you explore off-season, go off-beat, travel green, or love local, visit Europe responsibly for an unexpected upgrade.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for that. And I'm going to repeat what you said. I'm glad you came and I'm glad you stayed. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience. Thank you for being with us. And thank you to all those online and on Euronews who've been with us this morning for the Destination Europe Summit. We hope that we've enlightened you and you've been informed about something perhaps you didn't know about this sector. Thank you so much again, Eduardo. We'll see you soon. Do keep an eye out for a little best of as well that we'll have on Euronews coming up in the next couple of weeks, and lots of online articles. But for now, thank you so much for your attention. Take care and see you soon.
There's lunch, and they can visit this.
And for all those in the room and not watching online, there's lunch and networking, which is, of course, what these events are all about. So please make your way out to that room and enjoy all that there is to offer. And I'm looking forward to chatting to you all. Thank you so much.
The museum is also open for everybody.
Oh, and the museum is also open. Yay.
Thanks so much.
Cultural heritage.
Amazing.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Did you do it?